So, well, a warm welcome and a nice afternoon to everybody here in the audience. I have the honor to host you on the second day of the Critical Change Lab Panic as Pedagogy. And of course, it's an exciting task for me, so I really wanted to do my best. And I asked ChatGPT to find some powerful remarks or a nice joke for a really unforgettable opener to this panel, learning to disrupt non-formal education in critical changes. And ChatGPT, forget about the joke, yeah, because ChatGPT wasn't fun at all. ChatGPT don't have any humor, I guess, and it's left to us humans, luckily, or at least to some people. And even the poetic introduction, it didn't work so well. It was more, ChatGPT didn't at all understand the word or the meaning of non-formal in the context we are all interested in. It was more the output was more an alleluia of orderless and messy, how it said, learning. So let's forget about this introduction and let's talk about panic. Not really about panic. What I want to talk about with you today is more the chances that lie within this state of panic. Because panic is an existential signal which throws human beings back onto its very fundamental conditions. And what we do in fundamental conditions is we ask fundamental questions. A part of this reflection is to think about agency and empowerment. And having all this in my mind, I think it all comes down to education and to the question, what should I know these days to feel enabled for this world, and where do I get the opportunity to learn this? My name is Nicole Grüners. I'm the head of the Education and Content Development Department in the Electronica Center, so it's my very big interest as well. And I will guide you through this afternoon where we meet we learn about spaces of encounter, spaces of curiosity, spaces of making, but as well spaces of reflecting. In this next 3 hours, it will unfold in panels, keynotes, and practical examples, strategies of non-formal educational places which exist beside and without traditional institutions. We will meet spaces beyond learning, which means spaces of action. And I want to take this word to start with the first keynote. So, as democratic systems face multiple crises, what we all know, and we will hear everywhere, one question surfaces again and again, and the question is, what happens when traditional institutions of knowledge can't hold their missions anymore? And to this question, we have answer from our keynote speaker, Aislinn Murray. Aislinn Murray is the founder and producer of the Beta Festival. Beta Festival is Ireland's leading platform in the intersection or in the exploration of the intersection of technology, art and society. This festival invites the public with exhibitions and performances to interrogate with emerging technologies and their civic implications. Ashleen Murray was former head of programming at the Science Gallery in Dublin and really into community programs. And she's well known for her passion for inviting the audience and center the community voices. So give a warm welcome to Murray.
Thank you so much. Just get my glasses. Now, you'll be disappointed if you are looking for answers because I don't have answers, but I have more questions. So good afternoon, and thank you so much for the warm introduction to Andrew and Andrea, also for the invitation. It's really an honour to be here, and thank you all for being part of it. I want to begin by acknowledging the difficult backdrop we're living through, rising authoritarianism, disinformation running wild, and democratic systems that feel increasingly fragile and broken. That may sound bleak, but I don't stand here with a message of doom, because while the systems may falter, the ideals of democracy, participation, debate, and collective agency remain powerful, and cultural spaces, like festivals, are uniquely placed to keep those ideals alive. Today I want to talk about cultural spaces as civic laboratories, places where democracy can be rehearsed, challenged, and reimagined. I'll use my own work with Beta Festival as a case study, drawing on examples that show how creativity, play, and dialogue can create space for critical change in everyday life. Here's how I'll move through this. First, a little grounding in my own story, then how cultural spaces function as civic labs, and then 3 chapters: participation, debate, and collective agency, each illustrated with examples, and finally, why this matters now. A little bit about me and my work first. So, as was mentioned, my background is actually in philosophy and theatre, where I specialised in research in the evolving role of the spectator. However, there have been 2 consistent lines throughout my work: removing obstacles for artists to make work and creating low barrier access for audiences. I worked for 8 years at Science Gallery Dublin, the founding member of the Science Gallery Network, which created programmes bringing together art and science for young people, making science accessible through exhibitions, events, and education programmes. It was there I became fascinated by informal and non-formal learning, how cultural spaces can equip people with the tools to understand the world, not by telling them what to think, but by creating experiences that allow them to think differently. When Science Gallery closed in 2022, I was reflecting on what to do next. Artistically, my interest was in digital and new media arts, but I also saw a gap. While governments were producing digital strategies and AI policies, the public weren't always part of those conversations. There were things happening in industry and academia, but cultural engagement was missing. There was clear investment in new courses and training, but for many people, that first access to ideas and the technology itself was absent. As well as this, and as many of you may know, Ireland is the European headquarters to some of the biggest tech companies in the world: Google, Meta, OpenAI, LinkedIn, Microsoft, to name just a few. As a result, you'd expect us to have one of the most critically literate publics in the world, but we don't. That gap between policy on paper and practice in public was part of the spark for me. So I founded Beta Festival, Ireland's only festival of art and technology, to critically engage with the impact of new technologies on society, and to create a platform for artists, researchers, and the public to interrogate these issues together. The festival is co-founded by the Digital Hub, and our research partner is ADAPT, Ireland's leading research centre in AI and digital content. The festival happens annually in November, with a conference over the opening weekend and exhibitions, performances, and workshops happening over the following 2 weeks, intentionally overlapping with Science Week and Irish Design Week for broader audience engagement. One side of the festival is anchored in the artistic ecosystem, and the other focuses on audience-centred programming underpinned by tech and digital literacy. Our purpose is to empower... Sorry, so many P's, okay. Our purpose is to empower and inspire people in the way they think about and use new technologies, to support and showcase Irish artists and researchers in art and technology, and our goals to position Ireland as a leader in art and technology, to nurture an ecosystem around art and technology in Ireland, and to empower citizens to think about, understand, and engage with new technologies. Over the past decade, cultural institutions have shifted. They're no longer just delivering content, they're spaces of co-creation, where audiences don't just watch, but they participate. Shifting from spectatorship to action. Michael John Gorman, founding director of Science Gallery, wrote a book called Idea Colliders, which if you hadn't read, I highly recommend. And in it, he makes this argument that 21st institutions move from large to small, from slow to fast, from stable to more agile, from interactive to participatory, from enclosed to porous, and from that content provider to a creative platform. Science centres, makerspaces, museums, they're interdisciplinary by their nature, and so are natural laboratories of participation and spaces for gathering and interrogating ideas. I think part of what we are witnessing internationally is the dismantling of visible diversity structures and critical discourse. The challenge for us is to embed these values so deeply into our cultural programmes and ways of working that they are inseparable from the fabric of our institutions, too integral to be targeted or undone. As Priya Parker writes in The Art of Gathering, how we gather shapes what is possible. And I want to pair this with Ruha Benjamin's quote from her most recent book, Imagination, a Manifesto, in which she argues that imagination is a powerful and vital tool for social change, not a luxury, and calls for a collective effort to dismantle oppressive systems by cultivating a radical imagination that goes beyond dominant, destructive narratives. Remember to imagine and craft the worlds you cannot live without, just as you dismantle the ones you cannot live with. Cultural spaces aren't parliaments or corporations. They can hold neutrality. They can blur boundaries. They can bring together industry, academia, artists, and communities in ways that rarely happen elsewhere. They allow for imagination to test versions of the world we want to see. I want to look at these ideals of participation, debate, and collective action using some examples from Beta's program. So starting with participation, when audiences become authors. The first project is Not Breaking This Wave Drowns Hate by Kate Austin. This tackles the escalating crisis of marine microplastic pollution by imagining futures where humans and oceans exist in balance rather than in extraction. Developed during a residency at Galway Port as part of the European Commission's Starts for Water programme and supported by the Centre for Creative Technology in Galway, who are here today, the work combines sculpture, sound, and ethically trained AI to create a multi-sensory installation. At its core is a bespoke AI system trained on visions of regenerative coastal futures co-created with Galway communities, ranging from school children to refugees and local sailing clubs, ensuring that the narrative of ocean survival is literally shaped by those that live alongside it. The project built its core data set through workshops with Galway communities, asking people to visualise sustainable regenerative coastal futures and then using those visions to train the AI. This isn't hand-wavy engagement, it's material, a community-generated data set and an explicit government structure for how the data is held and used, developed as part of the residency outcomes. The community partners are named, and the vision contributors are credited, so the social authorship is visible rather than anonymised, creating an installation whose images and behaviours are literally co-authored by local publics, not scraped from the internet. The participatory programme ran in phases and fed back into itself. Evaluation master classes where the AI prototype was demonstrated to community members, methods and processes were shared, and structured feedback was gathered to refine the work. That loop, demonstrate, discuss, iterate, made the workshops do double duty as skill sharing and as critical audit spaces. Two ethical choices stand out. First, the team ditched an LLM approach in favour of a computer vision pipeline to avoid flattening nuanced community contributions into text tokens and to better preserve the situated knowledge in a relatively small high-value set. Second, they formalised a government structure around the community-created dataset rather than treating consent as a one-off signature. Together, those decisions push back against extractive methods and keep the model accountable to contributors. Secondly, the collection and training were carried out with researchers at ADAPT and Dublin City University and secured approval from the university's Research Ethics Committee, an important procedural backdrop given the public-facing nature of the work, and the first time that an artistic project had been presented to and received approval from the university's Ethics Committee. The workshops weren't tokenistic outreach, they shaped exhibition and performance contexts. The prototype AI was publicly shared with contributor communities in Non-Island Theatre in March, months before the full premiere, making the audience co-reviewers rather than passive recipients. Learnings documented by the team also show they treated community work as infrastructure, bringing in additional local producers for the intense nature of the place-based projects and continual oversight of new tech development. Impact-wise, the participatory pipeline carried through to public presentation. The installation premiered at Galway International Arts Festival, with plans to continue developing both the symbiophone and the participatory methods along the Atlantic coast, publishing the dataset and its governance structure, and targeting peer-reviewed dissemination with adept researchers. The point is continuity. Communities don't just inspire the show, they retain a stake in how contributions persist, get documented, and seed future iterations. That's the ethical bar for AI art publics, and here it's explicitly part of the roadmap. Participation that outlives the event is the kind that changes futures, and this work will have a future showing at Beta Festival this November. With participative work, we must also meet people where they are. Not everyone feels a gallery or a festival is for them. So the challenge is, how do we stretch the frame? How do we create encounters through people's everyday interests, gardening, farming, sailing, birdwatching, even pets? Going back to the first year of the festival, we wanted to show Potato Internet by Caroline Sinders in the exhibition. It's a speculative project, an anti-upscaling network powered partly by potatoes, rethinking everything from hardware to governance. The small-scale experimental social network is partially powered by potatoes and envisions and reimagines the internet in times of climate emergency and global energy crisis. Now, in Ireland, potatoes resonate in very particular ways. We love them. So we asked, how could we broaden its reach? Just down the road from our festival venue is a community garden in an under-resourced part of Dublin. Its members aren't typical festival goers, so instead of asking them to come to us, we went to them. We hosted potato planting and harvesting workshops with the artist. People came for the gardening, but as their hands worked with the soil, we talked about plant networks, internet networks, and the infrastructures that shapes our lives. Participation was playful, tactile, rooted in everyday culture. In the end, most of the participants did actually end up coming to the festival to see the potatoes they had grown and picked displayed and powering the installation. The point was to design that low barrier opportunity for engagement, playful, tactile, local ways, and local ways into complex systems. We're currently developing a strand of programming called Pets and Proxies, partially inspired by my own dog, Emmy, co-director of Beta Festival. But sincerely, because since getting my dog, I've been surprised by how my own social world has expanded. I'm friendly with people from all walks of life, people who again wouldn't necessarily come to an art and technology festival, and that made me interested to think about a program not only for pets, because people will gather for their pets. And once they gather, you have an opening, a moment for stealth digital literacy. The pets get the attention, they can play the video games or the VR, it's a playful provocation, but over tea and coffee, the humans get to talk about and question technology. The Pets and Proxies strand takes a playful but critical approach to the intersection of digital culture, animal sentience, and human care, all underpinned by tech literacy. By developing VR, AR, and interactive experiences designed for pets, it flips the usual logic of tech for humans and instead asks, how do animals experience technology, and what can we learn by thinking about technology in this way? At the same time, the humans accompanying their pets are nudged into stealth digital literacy training, reflecting on their own relationship with digital systems through the lens of care and interspecies coexistence. The pet focus works as an accessible entry point into wider questions of AI and animal sentience, post-human media, and nature as user. Pets occupy a unique position in society. They're familiar, yet other, dependent, yet autonomous, emotional companions, yet beings with distinct perceptual worlds. Designing technology for pets is not just novelty, it challenges anthropocentric assumptions in tech design, raising questions about whose needs are served and how we define participation. In this sense, the workshops are provocations that stretch beyond play. If we take seriously the idea of designing with and for other species, what new ethics, aesthetics, and infrastructures might emerge? Practically, the workshops will engage two key audience groups, young people and older people and pet owners. For youth, activities like composing music for pets create playful ways of thinking about interspecies futures while building confidence in digital tools. For older participants and pet owners, interactive installations, whether testing a dog's literary preferences or imagining cat raves, offer light-hearted, low-barrier entry into conversations around data, digital literacy, and welfare. These activities use humour and curiosity as a gateway to more serious reflections on technology and care, while also tackling the digital divide among older demographics. The Strand also builds on Beta Festival's ethos of meeting audiences where they are. Pets are a natural social connector, cutting across class, age, and geography. By hosting workshops in libraries, community centres, and even pet retailers, the programme reaches people who might never step into a gallery or research lab. It extends Beta's model of embedding art tech experimentation into everyday life, making abstract ideas about AI design concrete through encounters with the people, through encounters with the animals people already care about deeply. Cultural participation doesn't have to be solemn or lofty. It can be absurd, funny, embodied, and still deeply political. If participation opens the door, debate makes the room useful. Democracy thrives on disagreement, and cultural spaces can host it in ways that parliaments often fail to. At Beta, we hosted a citizen think-in on facial recognition. People arrived hesitant, but soon residents, researchers, and policymakers were grappling with urgent questions. Who gets seen, who gets tracked, who gets excluded? Co-organised by Dr. Ciara Bracken-Roach and Dr. Emma Clark, the think-in brought together diverse voices for a timely discussion on the potential impacts of facial recognition technology in Irish policing. With government plans to implement facial recognition technology in law enforcement, the event provided a valuable platform for the public to critically examine the technology's implications. The conversation began with expert insights from Daniel Kahn-Gilmore, Senior Staff Technologist with the ACLU's Speech, Privacy and Technology Project, and Olga Cronin, who's the Senior Policy Officer at the Irish Council for Civil Liberties. Both speakers highlighted the arguments for and against FRT on safety, privacy, freedom and civil rights, setting the stage for a balanced debate on this complex issue. Following the initial presentations, participants divided into small groups to discuss a scenario focusing on FRT's role in public safety. Would we support using FRT to identify a vandal after car damage or track a person involved in an unintentional hit and run? The scenario encouraged deliberation on the accuracy of FRT systems, privacy implications, and the fairness of deploying it in justice systems. From locating missing persons to possible misidentifications, the possible benefits and risks of FRT were discussed. The think-in highlighted the complexities and societal stakes involved in FRT's integration into policing and underscored the public's role in having their say on technology policies. This conversation was then carried through in the exhibition Unsettling the Algorithm, which included a work by Derek Curry and Jennifer Grodecki, Boogaloo Bias. Boogaloo Bias is an interactive artwork lampooning the unregulated use of facial recognition technology, particularly the practice of brute forcing, where law enforcement uses images of celebrity lookalikes when high-quality photos of suspects are not available. Presented in the guise of a corporate fiction, the Boogaloo Bias facial recognition system searches for members of the Boogaloo Boys, anti-law enforcement militia using an algorithm trained on faces of characters from the 1984 movie Breakin' 2 Electric Boogaloo. The film is the namesake for the Boogaloo Boys, who emerged from 4chan meme culture and have been present at both right and left-wing protests in the US since January 2020. The system is used to search live video feeds, protest footage, and images that are uploaded to the Boogaloo Bias website. All matches made by the system are false positives. No information from the live feeds or websites uploaded is saved or shared. The work is based on numerous academic and journalistic investigations into how law enforcement has implemented facial recognition when they lack a clear, high-quality image of a suspect. Rather than providing a technological solution for how to improve facial recognition, Boogaloo Bias allows viewers to interact with a system that emphasizes the most questionable facial recognition practices in order to raise questions about oversight within a socio-technical system where human judgment is aided by proprietary black box technology developed by private companies for profit. Interactive works like this allow participants to exercise their critical thinking skills and test ideas and technologies in the safe confines of a cultural space. They allow visitors the opportunity to engage with topics at a level that they feel comfortable. In the same exhibition last year, we also had Cold Call by Sam Levine and Tiga Brain, an installation where audiences run a call centre that wastes the time of fossil fuel executives, reframing time theft as carbon offsetting. It's playful, mischievous, and also sparks heated debate. What counts as activism? What counts as responsibility? The work draws on strategies of worker sabotage and applies them in the context of high-emission companies of the fossil fuel industry. A novel carbon offset methodology called time theft as avoided emissions has been developed specifically for the project. Time theft is where workers are paid for the time when they are idle. For example, fake sick days, sleeping on the job, extended lunch breaks, or engaging in non-work related activities like social media or unrelated phone calls. In this installation, the artist purchased the phone numbers of 1,000 executives who work in high-emitting industries like mining and oil extraction. Audiences were invited to work in the call centre and call the executives in an attempt to steal as much time from them as possible in order to generate carbon credits. It approaches the topic in a playful way, in a gallery setting, but gives clear agency and action to the audience to immediately take part and contribute, blurring the line between art and activism. With Critical Change Lab, we collaborated with Dr. Mairead Hurley and our team from Trinity College Dublin on an innovative, interdisciplinary and cross-sector project with digital artist and XR educator Barry Haughey. Over 7 weeks, we worked with young people to imagine potential futures and reflect on the pathways that can lead to preferred tomorrows. It combined arts and humanities with STEM in an immersive learner-led project to develop digital and creative skills in an out-of-school environment. Participants actively identified and engaged with local and global challenges affecting their communities, the outputs of which were exhibited in a digital installation at the inaugural Beta Festival. Highlights included innovative ideas in the future of transport and using emerging technologies such as robots to help more vulnerable members of the community. Critically, the programme not only gave the participants the opportunity to imagine alternative futures utilising technology, but through access to the technology, we also got to discuss who gets to have access to cutting-edge technology. And if we can create a whole other version of the world in VR, then who can or should get to create it? And who decides the rules? Debate matters when it travels. That's collective agency. Debate is good, access is good, but what matters is whether people feel empowered to act together. The Ethics Studio is a co-creation with Adapt Research Centre, the festival's research partner, and Ireland's leading research centre in AI and digital content. So when we talk about the programme being underpinned by tech and digital literacy, it actually is through our collaboration with their researchers. The Ethics Studio is a live research environment in the exhibition space designed to interrogate the ethics of digital and automated technologies. It sits between art, research, and public engagement, creating participatory infrastructure for exploring complex questions about algorithmic systems. Unlike a conventional laboratory, which often privileges scientific authority, the Ethics Studio positions artists, technologists, researchers, and everyday citizens side by side, generating distributed reflection on how technology reshapes daily life. It draws from architectural and studio approaches, moving from theory into hands-on practices, where speculative artifacts, interactive exhibits, and collaborative debates spark new ways of grappling with ethical challenges. Its foundations lie in critical media art and speculative design. Artists have long taken on the role of provocateurs, using their practices to make visible the invisible logics of surveillance, data extraction, and environmental harm. In the Ethics Studio, this tradition meets speculative design and introduces fictional technologies or prototypes as probes for reflection. By blending critique and imagination, the studio surfaces not just what technologies do, but what they could do, and what kinds of futures they might enable or foreclose. The result is a hybrid environment, part gallery, part lab, part forum, so no single authority gets to dominate the conversation. It resists neat categorization while inviting messy, effective, and participatory encounters with digital culture. In practice, the studio unfolds as an evolving set of activities. These include artist residencies, participatory projects, where visitors contribute their predictions and concerns, and collaborative exhibits that are revisited annually to track shifting perspectives. A temperature check, if you will, with the general public. A resource library complements this hands-on work, giving participants access to readings and methods on ethics and technology. During Beta Festival 2024, for example, the studio offered interactive research exhibits and sessions, such as Unionizing the Speculative by artist Noam Youngrock Sun, situating ethical reflection within playful yet critical encounters. In this way, the Ethics Studio functions as an alternative kind of public laboratory, not a site for extracting universal truths, but a dynamic gateway into multiple knowledges, emotions, and power relations surrounding our algorithmic present and possible futures. At this year's festival, we'll be working with ADAPT's researchers to adapt their ethics canvas, which has been developed to encourage educators, entrepreneurs, engineers, and designers to engage with ethics in their research and innovation projects. and we will be developing this further through workshops at the festival, specifically as a tool for technology, art and ethics. Last year, we hosted our inaugural AI Art Assembly at the festival, which was designed having noticed that national AI policy conversations in Ireland were happening without artists or cultural workers, despite the art being frequently held up in the media when discussing AI as it captures the public's imagination. Working at the intersection of art and technology, art and science, or art and research, you find yourself in an interesting position of being able to code switch and understand the language of researchers in academia and the language of arts and culture. And these things are not always in conversation with one another. So we created our own assembly, half invited, half open call. The AI Art Assembly was designed as a collaborative forum to explore how artificial intelligence is reshaping the arts and cultural sector, bringing together artists, technologists, researchers, cultural leaders, and policymakers. It created space for cross-disciplinary dialogue on the challenges and opportunities AI presents. The Assembly did not aim for definitive answers, but rather a rolling agenda of issues, with an emphasis on keeping ethics, transparency, and human creativity at the core of any future strategy. The unique positioning of hosting this discussion in Ireland was that we could invite industry to be at the table, including Accenture, OpenAI, and Intel, among others, as well as representation from all the Irish research centres in this area. Members of the AI advisory from government also attended, as well as artists and cultural practitioners. The Assembly facilitated 10 tables of 10 people, with each table having a subject area expert, as well as a cultural leader, to ensure the conversation could be productive and informed. The tables were curated to ensure balance across the room, and we operated Chatham House rules and no journalists so that people could speak freely. Discussions revealed both optimism and unease. On the one hand, AI tools were seen as powerful enablers, offering greater accessibility, efficiency, and new creative possibilities. They can act as collaborators, sparking fresh ideas and redefining what creativity might mean in the digital age. On the other hand, participants voiced deep concerns. Risks of copyright infringement, biased data sets, environmental costs, and the erosion of fair remuneration for artists. Many fear that unregulated adoption could enforce exploitative structures that already present in the arts and tech industries. The Assembly stressed the urgent need for clear frameworks and policies. Recommendations included establishing universal definitions of key terms like AI, generative AI, and creativity, ensuring transparency from tech companies, developing stronger copyright and IP protections, and creating flexible, artist-led funding models. Training and education were also highlighted as essential to prevent gatekeeping and to equip artists with the tools to engage ethically and effectively with AI. Importantly, artists must always have a seat at the table when policy decisions are being made. The AI Art Assembly called for solidarity and long-term strategy rather than hype-driven responses. Avoiding both technophobia and blind adoption, the report emphasised balance, treating AI as a material rather than a replacement, and ensuring human creativity and values remain central. It is a reminder that the arts sector must anticipate systemic change, but with caution, equity, and imagination, guiding how AI is integrated into cultural practice. The result was a set of recommendations that we published and shared with Ireland's AI Advisory Council, Grassroots Civic Engagement Shaping National Policy. And the model resonated internationally. With the British Council, we adapted it for the National Gallery of Jordan, with participants from Palestine, India, Iraq, and beyond. Each assembly builds knowledge, progresses debates, and builds the tools we lack for navigating AI, art, and culture together. This is a model that we're hoping to continue and will roll out again in November, with another edition building the conversation and learnings from the previous iterations. And that's what I mean by collective agency, forcing your way into the policy conversation, not as lobbyists, but as a community of practice. The report itself is not perfect, but there are simply not enough resources out there yet for people, particularly around AI and art. Putting in place note takers and a graphic illustrator ensured we could easily and quickly turn around the conversation into a useful, although imperfect, document. Speaking of resources, I would like to just also give a shout out to the recently published Arts Council of England's AI Responsibility Toolkit, written and collated by Northern Irish researcher Dr. Una Murphy. Someone described it as the couch to 5K for AI art and ethics, which I think is a pretty excellent description, but it's really worth a read, and it's freely available online. So when democracy falters under the weight of authoritarianism and apathy, our choice is not hopelessness. Our choice is to reimagine democracy through shared practice, through critical reflection, through collective imagination. What do all these examples, potato-powered networks, pets in VR, citizens debating facial recognition, or assemblies in AI add up to? They show us that democracy isn't just a system of governance, it's a practice. It lives or dies in the everyday acts of participation, debate, and collective agency that cultural spaces make possible. Cultural institutions, whether they're festivals, museums, or makerspaces, are more than sites of learning or spectacle. They are civic laboratories, places where communities can play, argue, imagine, and prototype different ways of being together. They are non-formal classrooms of democracy, equipping people not with rote answers, but with the confidence and tools to question power, to experiment with alternatives, and to stay curious in the face of complexity. Trust in institutions is being challenged, although new things can emerge. Formal education is stretched, and policy often overlooks the critical literacies people need most. Yet in these overlooked, playful, non-formal spaces, we are rehearsing democracy anew. We are embedding values of care, creativity, and resistance in ways that are inseparable from culture itself. And so, when democracy falters amid fracture and authoritarianism, our choice is not hopelessness. Our choice is to reimagine democracy through shared practice, critical reflection, and acts of collective imagination. That might look like planting potatoes, or gathering for our pets, or sitting in a room where artists, technologists, and citizens reimagine ethics of AI. However modest, each of these rehearsals matters, because democracy is not a building or a policy document. It is a habit, an act, a culture we create together. Learning to disrupt means learning to practice democracy differently, and cultural spaces, if we nurture them, can be the laboratories where that practice not only survives, but grows. Thank you. There's the thank you. I have a little postscript, if you'll just enjoy, let me just give a little plug, if that's okay. So I focused for the purpose of this talk on a lot of the kind of community engagement, the non-formal learning, and as I mentioned, there's kind of the two sides to the festival, more which is tied to the artistic ecosystem as well. And we actually have a piece with two Irish artists as part of this year's festival, Leon Butler and Peter Power. Last night they premiered this work, Foolish Flame, commissioned by Ars Electronica Deep Space 8K in the Ars Electronica Centre. And its final performance is taking place this evening at 6 p.m, so please do come along if you're around. I'm obviously biased, but it's really an incredible and really beautiful piece of work. And then my final plug, this is an image of by John French from Ramstag. It's created, and it's of me this day last week on my wedding day. So that's me at the intersection of art and technology. But more than that, it's me at the intersection of art, technology, and honeymoon, or work moon, as we're calling it. My poor husband, who already knew what he was getting into, is here with me on honeymoon at Ars Electronica. So a huge round of applause for Mr. Aisling Murray.
Thank you, Aisling, and congratulations. And where's Emmy?
She's at home.
Oh, no. Thank you for this super inspiring projects. I guess there are maybe some questions popping up in the audience. Questions, or you can also pass some comments. You can also drop some rhymes. I don't know. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Aisling, for a great presentation. I was really struck by your, I suppose, approach to activism and approach to change. It's a very exciting approach because it doesn't rely on banging people's heads against the wall to tell them what you know is real. It's more about inveigling your way in. And also your wonderful approach with audience as well in terms of that stealth programming. I'm a big fan of it, and I think more of that sort of thing generally, please, everybody.
Can we pass the microphone to somebody else?
Hi, Aisling. Well done. That's a great joke. We're here in Austria, and then there's like other festivals around the world that do art and technology. And I suppose I'm just thinking about, what do you think is it about the Irish scene that offers something different, or what's missing from the Irish scene? Like what's uniquely Irish about Beta?
It's a really good question. I mean, I think one of the points which I kind of touched on is I think it's really interesting that so many of the big tech companies have their European headquarters in Ireland, that we should have one of the most critically literate publics, and we don't. There are some people, there are kind of different groups or artistic collectives that are interrogating some of that, but I think that's a really interesting, unique position to have the festival happen when all those companies are there, and that you can potentially invite some of those people into the room. I think the other piece is maybe more around kind of some of the artistic piece, in that you see a lot of technology as spectacle, and it's a stereotype, but it's a stereotype for a good reason. Irish artists are really good storytellers, and I mean, Leon Butler and Peter Power are an incredible example of this, that work that I mentioned. Like the ability of Irish artists to tell stories in really compelling ways that make you feel something utilizing technology and introduce a little bit of that criticality and literacy is really powerful. And I really feel that there's a huge opportunity for Irish artists in that area.
Thank you for that interesting question. Next.
Wonderful, from the Slovenian fan club. I have a question actually. What are your experience on that kind of approaches, non-formal approaches, within the formal education frame? Do you collaborate with universities or high schools or elementary schools?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So previously when I worked in Science Gallery, we would have a bit, because Science Gallery was based within the university, but it was still non-formal or informal learning. We collaborate a lot, so we've got our research partner, Adapt Research Centre, so we would collaborate a little bit with them on some of their youth programs or some of their outreach programs, and then obviously we collaborate with Dr. Mairead Hurley in Trinity College Dublin as well. But again, it's all kind of in a non-formal or informal learning context. I mean, I'm interested in how cultural spaces or festivals can provide resources and toolkits. I mean, the thing is that we have all of these incredible, interesting conversations like over these few days at Ars Electronica, and what can happen to them afterwards. How can those be, I mean, I know they're available online for people to look at, but how can you produce something? I mean, it's one of the reasons with the AI Art Assembly that we produced the report, was so people would have something to reference or go to, because there just isn't enough out there. So I'm interested in future editions of the festival to look at how we can capture a little bit more of the conversation, a little bit more of the workshops, and then partner with, say, the National Youth Council and some of their youth reach programs, because from experience in kind of collaborating or working with some of those services, they have incredible instructors and teachers, but they don't have enough resources or time to develop new programs. And the thing is that cultural spaces are already developing these tools. They're already developing potential content that could be rolled out, particularly for tech and digital literacy. So it's something that I want to explore more in the future, but it's not happening right now. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, we have time for a short question.
To follow up on that sort of idea of capturing, because I feel that often working in sort of culture, especially in terms of like non-formal learning and education, that these programs are often very like transient. And do you sort of have an idea of how we can like really make sure that there's more sustainability around sort of non-formal learning in these kind of like instantaneous, like especially in terms of festival culture environments?
Yeah, I mean, I think particularly in those kind of like European project frameworks, I think ensuring that there are like multiple cultural partners, because I think sometimes when it can be primarily like academic partners, it gets a little bit insular. I think certainly the toolkits and looking at the way that those things are disseminated, but also how they can be embedded in your exhibition spaces. So say like with the Ethics Studio, that exists so that it's a little bit more fluid space, so that kind of researchers sculptures or projects we have, or different things can be displayed, and people can kind of engage with a kind of science laboratory, but in an artistic kind of cultural space context. Yeah. Thanks, Andrew.
Well done. Super proud to see you here. I'm very curious as to your insight in starting a festival, you know, being at something like Ars Electronica and seeing how incredibly huge it is. It's kind of hard to imagine how something like that starts, and you've had such a successful first 2 years with Beta, and I'm just interested to see if you have any little insights for or encouragements for how you might start something like that.
I mean, I think that you have to be a kind of crazy person to start something. You kind of have to have like a blind naivety, and I'm kind of accepting that I have that, and that's okay. I mean, for me, Ars Electronica was a huge inspiration for me, you know, and from when I worked in Science Gallery at Mairead, you know, we would come here, we were part of different European projects, and it really was then when the gallery closed, reflecting on what I wanted to do next and seeing how something like this could work so well in the Irish context. I think advice that I would have would just be, you know, I mean, start doing small things yourself. Don't take on an entire festival immediately. Like, you know, a few people when I started the festival were like, oh, wow, it's so amazing. It's so impressive. You know, you've got all these ideas and strategy. And the thing is, to other people on the outside, it looks like I came up with that in the course of a year from when I was made redundant. But it wasn't. That's been like 15 years work of all the ideas that I've been interested in and building on every project that I worked on. So I would start small. I would meet with the people that you admire. You know, ask people for coffees. Everyone started somewhere, and yeah.
Thank you, Aisling.
Thank you.
Allow me now to accompany you to the next program slot. Creating rapid response learning learning environments is the topic of our next discussion. As science, society, and technology evolves so rapidly, we have to ask how can we build learning environments that keep pace with all this speed. And help young people not just to follow or understand, but rather lead their way. On the stage now we have 3 outstanding speakers and our moderator, Dobrivoje Lale Eric. Please come to the stage. Lale is from the Center of Promotion of Science in Belgrade. Lale leads initiatives at the national level that connect science with society, turning abstract research into active public engagement. His work focuses on STEAM and science, citizen science and learning environments that respond to complex challenges like climate change and technological disruption. Lale will be in conversation with Pedro Russo, Professor of Astronomy and Society at the Leiden University and board member of the Ciência Viva, Portugal's national cultural agency, science culture agency, sorry. Pedro's work spans from academia to grassroots public engagement, and while coordinating the International Year of Astronomy, till supporting the local science centers that embed the education with communities. Federico Bomba, founder of Cineglossa, builds cultural ecosystems where artists, scientists, and technologies co-create solutions to social and environmental challenges. Federico's work bridges analytical philosophy and performance using creative methods to address issues from climate resilience to digital equity. Victoria, artist and researcher, and directs the UCLA Art Science Center, and she creates immersive installations that connects nanotechnology, sounds, identity, and her work challenges how we think and sense and interact with our environment. Lale, please undertake the stage with your guests. Have a good talk.
Thank you so much for your kind introduction. Okay, maybe now, yeah? Thank you, okay. Thank you so much again, Nicole, for your kind introduction. We are here to speak about how to create rapid response learning environments. And actually, I prepared one more formal introduction for today. But actually, I was super impressed by the final segment of the pre-ceremony yesterday, which was dedicated to fantastic U19 selections. And I think most of us, except you, Pedro, attended that event when actually we were able to understand about projects by young minds from Austria, by young people aged from even so young as 9 into 19, dealing with extraordinary seriously topics. And I think that they would be fantastic speakers as well with us, because it's about their perception, their perspective, how they want to deal with challenges and global issues that we are all facing. And we are here, of course, to discuss about different ways of learning in formal, non-formal, and informal environments. It is also about how to establish active intergenerational communications, exchanges of knowledge, and different kind of collaborations. It is also important to involve in different ways, different sectors, different social groups, to hear different voices, of course, and to act interdisciplinary or even transdisciplinary, somehow to overcome boundaries that were set a long time ago. And of course, it is mostly about how to keep it, how to preserve it as a kind of lifelong cycle, to keep learning as an instrumental part of our beings, of our personalities. And in this sense, I think one of the goals of this session is to see how we can reach a learning beyond single knowledge or only unilateral perspectives. But since we are at the festival with the title Panic, yes or no, and since we need somehow to respond about the current global status and changes, so Federico, if I may start with you, and if I may address you as Signore Bomba, as I usually like. It sounds to me that you are quite familiar with explosions generally across the globe. So in this sense, and having in mind all these multiple crises that were already mentioned, should we panic?
Thank you, Lale. Hello everyone. No, I think we shouldn't panic. I think that the cultural sector has always been very keen to unpredictability, and if we have also chosen this sector to work with, is because we don't really like paths that are already taken, and so we really like to explore. We are explorer of planets that we already don't know. So maybe sometimes these planets we don't like, and I think we can make an effort to, and we have a responsibility for making it better. But we shouldn't panic. I talk a lot with the teachers. For instance, they panic a lot, and it's understandable why they're panicking. But I think we can help them and guide and take responsibility for guiding them somewhere else instead of panicking. Yeah.
So no panic yet.
No panic yet. Yes. Exactly.
At least on this side of the Atlantic.
Yeah, and then.
And what about the other side, Vesna? You just.
I know where you're going with this. So I'm from UCLA. Maybe you read the news. But I would say, I've been thinking about panic throughout this conference, and people are making fun and saying yes or no. Panic is something that is a reaction to the unexpected. Something that comes to you and you just panic, and it's involuntary response, right? I would say more anxiety that's been building for a few years, that gets more and more intense, and then of course there's the uncertainty. So I wouldn't define it as panic, but I would certainly define it as anticipation, and artists are very good at anticipating what's coming. So we're kind of anticipatory design scientists, as Buckminster Fuller would say. We anticipate even the digital era. We're kind of ahead of sciences a lot of times. So not panic, but preparedness. And responsiveness. So this title of this panel is perfect.
Yep.
No slides, responding quickly, looking around, checking out, nothing prepared, we're not reading. This is the right thing.
Okay, we'll explore that a bit more later. And
Yes, I'm not panic.
yeah, not panic. And Pedro, you are the one who is always setting up partnerships.
Yeah.
And you're bringing people together in these completely crazy times where people are getting apart. So what's your perspective?
About panic or not panicking, I think we have been telling people that we need to panic, right? If we think about this a couple of years ago, if you were coming to Ars Electronica, everyone saying, climate crisis is here, we need to panic, it's now, it's happening. And now I think we are in this new situation that we are telling people we need to be, let's get ready for the future, let's have hope for the future. But then you go through these exhibition halls and so many things are so entangled that without having the methodologies, the mechanisms, festivals to try to untangle all this complexity, it's going to be really difficult to tell people, don't panic just yet. I think we are all panicking in a way, and we need to find a way to untangle and create really a sense that maybe we can control. But now it doesn't feel that way.
Yeah.
So I'm more like, yes, panic. Just for the sake of discussion as well.
This festival is an amazing stage to go into many current topics and themes. I think we made some general overview and we identified some risks. But if I can start with you, Vesna, the current status of academic community and research and everything practically regarding knowledge in the States is under question, under serious threat. So were you able anyhow to respond quickly, rapidly to this, what you are facing as a community? And are there ways maybe to use this extremely negative situation as a kind of a test bed, as an experiment with some maybe positive outcomes?
Deep breath. I would say that all along, as far as my experiences leading an art science center between the sciences and the arts, it's been very difficult to combine these cultures, to cross over bridges on many levels that you can also imagine. So in a way, all that we did as a center, as artists and scientists trying to break through these disciplinary boundaries and bureaucracies and administrative systems was to create ways to go around the system. So we have been going around the system from the start, really trying to figure out how do we find ways to meet, to do stuff, to get budgets, things that don't fit neatly into categories, which basically says we're well prepared for this moment. So I think we were actually anticipating, we're not surprised, we're not panicking, we're anticipating already for years. Academia already for years has been a problem because the system, the institutions, the way it's designed, the way it works, globally I should say, this is not just the States, maybe we're even more flexible than some places, are so crystallized. These institutions are, even with the most visionary deans and chairs, etc., once you start going through the crystallized system, you cannot budge. So we were not able to do what we wanted to do many times, and what we accomplished was against all odds. And now that it's being shut down from left to right to center, and certainly I won't talk about it, but we've been shut down left and right and center. And many grants have been put on pause, and it's affecting everybody in ways that you can even imagine in the ecosystem. It's really time to think about what has been already developing outside of academia as workshops, DIY, artists working together, things that we have also participated and encouraged, and see how that can develop into something new.
Yeah.
And really, we're ready for it. It's actually a good time. So it's not necessarily a disaster in the sense that it can open a door to being forced to do something. Before, it was kind of a choice, like, oh, we should do this because it's cool and it's important. And now it's like, we don't have a choice. There's nothing we can do. It's completely stopped on every level. You know, we check off every flag. climate change, feminism, you name it, we do it. So we're just checked off. And this is true for scientists too. Yeah. So scientists that are working on subjects that are not in the kind of list of words, there's about 100 words that are not allowed in grants and writing and research. Just they're cut off, and it's, you have to think in alternatives.
Yeah, but is it anyhow possible to assess the situation, to use it as some kind of live experiment, how to behave under such a serious threat?
No.
No. Okay, thanks. Let's go then back in time and discuss about something that we all faced globally. And Pedro, you was heavily engaged with how educational system should and how was responding during the pandemic crisis, during the corona and everything. Can you share some conclusions, some takeaways,
Sure, we can use that maybe as one of a big experiment that we had in education. And I think when we look at this rapid response topic and how can we create these spaces to support learning and education. And I think that here when we read something like a rapid response, you almost feel that we had like a SWAT team that just lands somewhere and fixes something, right? And I think that's not necessarily what happens, because for you to create these learning environments, you need to build trust in the communities, also with the teachers. So you need to be present for a long time, have this relationship with your stakeholders, and then when crises come, you'll be in a much better situation to actually act and support based on the needs that they have, right? Not so much about what you want, top down, but you try to understand the needs. And I'll give you just like one example. I'm director of the National Agency for Scientific Culture in Portugal that oversees a network of 21 science centers. And these 21 science centers during the pandemic played a big role because they were supporting the schools with simple things like printing homework and distributing the homework through the houses of the students that, for example, didn't have that much internet access. As you know, the education moved rapidly to online, but some kids didn't really have access to a printer. And then the science centers could really provide that support. Also, the science centers, most of them have a makerspace, and they were the ones printing and building these face shields for the health professionals in the region. So I think it's when you are present in the community, you understand the needs and you understand what is needed. Something as simple as printing the homework can really be transformational in a moment of crisis. So I think that's some of the lessons. You need to be present, you need to be a partner, and people need to trust you, and they will come to you in times of crisis.
Thanks for that. Also, you mentioned potential use of technologies in different contexts.
Absolutely, yeah, even all the equipment that you have, right? Like a small makerspace, a 3D printer can be really important.
Exactly. So Federico, then in your case, actually in a maybe similar environment, what you are trying is actually to engage artists in order to explore different kinds of threats that we are facing. Of course, it's probably incomparable to discuss about pandemic and technologies in the same sentence, but still they're both overwhelming, global, and affecting each of us individually.
Yeah, I think that what we are looking for when we look for artists and we produce artists is a way that I can define with a word that comes from wrestling, which is smart. This is not actually my idea, but it's like a friend of mine's idea, which is a magician. He's called Mariano Tomatis, and he told me once that when people look at wrestling, there are different ways of looking at it. Sometimes there are people who feel smart, so they don't enjoy wrestling because they understand that it's a kind of a staged thing, so it's not funny. Some other people are mark, which means in English that they believe that it's true. And sometimes instead, I think the people who enjoy wrestling the best are the people who are smart, so that they understand that it's fake, but they still enjoy it. So they keep a balance between a suspension of disbelief and critical distance. And this is what we're looking for when we are finding artists and producing artists that can keep this in their artworks, so that they work like that to produce artworks to engage audiences tendencies in this relationship of a smart distance. So a suspension of disbelief, because nobody wants to read scientific reports, they are boring. So every time maybe a lot of people are writing a lot of scientific reports which are very important, but they are very boring. And
you're also writing scientific reports.
I do, but I'm not showing them today.
Okay.
And then at the same time, you need people to enjoy, to see, to believe in something, to have stories, but at the same time to create this critical distance. So for instance, errors inside this suspension of disbelief are a wonderful way of creating this balance. So sometimes in this suspension of disbelief, an error comes up and you understand what you're looking at. So you create awareness and you teach in this very quick way that these artworks become totems. And I think that we have to learn a lot from this kind of artist to prototype responses for this time of crisis to other people, to children, but not just to youth, to any people. If we want people to understand and to be aware and to criticize what we're doing and what is happening, we need to create stories, and we need also to let them have this critical distance to be aware. Some artists are doing it, and I'm looking for, and we're training artists also to do that more.
So it's also about changing context, you know. It's about putting things in different contexts.
Yes, many times if you put things in different contexts, there's the unexpected, and the unexpected opens like a surprise. And wonder is a fantastic engine.
Yes.
So we have to push wonder as much as we can.
Well,
yeah.
You gave me fantastic. This is also German word we are using in Serbia, Schlagwort, for Schlagwort. Yes, for the next round, which is whether the STEAM framework can offer adequate environment for addressing these critical topics, and whether we can use this holistic approach, integrating different subjects, different disciplines, different mindset, different scientific data, also different information through in one systematic way. And in this sense, Pedro, I'm returning to you. In Portugal, through Ciência Viva, you've been running for many years now a national STEAM-wide extracurriculum program, if I'm
yes,
right.
for 30 years.
30 years, yes.
Celebrating actually next year 30 years, which is a national strategy to focus on STEAM, like science, technology, engineering, mathematics, but of course to be focused on science and technology as a strategy to support schools, but not necessarily to be only within the schools. And so it's really, I think by now there's enough evidence that learning happens in so many different environments that go way beyond the classroom, that for a long time thought that the classroom would be the number one environment. And we know that the approaches like open schooling, holistic learning is something that we are very much aware. Learning in cultural spaces is very important, but it's also very important for things like science and technology. So Portugal, for 30 years, is implementing this strategy to create learning opportunities about STEM outside the classrooms. And one of the things that was done, going back to the pandemic, after the pandemic, was to create a network of STEM clubs where the schools could create a after-school learning environment for STEM, and the schools could apply, they could get money, teachers will have enough time to do activities outside the classroom around STEM, and at the moment 50% of the schools in the country have one of these clubs that started like this. So it's really a national, very good example of a national strategy can really create opportunities for, in this case, school kids to learn about different STEM topics that they decided which ones and really have a national impact. So definitely that's something that's very present.
So it sounds like a driving force for setting up new ways of literacy, addressing emerging topics.
Absolutely,
emerging
and this was very important also when, again, because of the pandemic and the trying to do some of the recovery from the learning that didn't happen during the pandemic. This could really help to focus on these STEM fields after the pandemic. So these clubs are very, very important to develop other skills that otherwise the students will not be able to access to, for sure.
Addressing young learners.
Anything from primary education and secondary education.
Okay, thanks. And then in that sense, Federico, can we reorient this team approach and then actually approach artists, offering them insights, instructions, learning mechanisms or even inclusion into modern learning pedagogies. So you at Cineglossa, you were devising that kind of model.
We try to do that. We try to devise some methods to make artists understand. For example, we work a lot on AI in the last 5-6 years, so as everyone, almost everyone. And I have an example of an artist we produced, Roberto Fassone. Roberto Fassone didn't know anything about AI when I called him, and I said, "You play with what?" It was 2019, and I said, and I had a project in mind, and I called him. And I said, you work a lot with words. Can I introduce you like a technology? It's called AI, and it's like that. At the beginning, he said no. I'm not interested in technology. I'm a very analog artist, so why should I be interested? Then I just showed him something. It was GPT-2 at that time. You could play with that a bit. And he said, okay, let's do that. And we put together a computer scientist and Roberto in 2 days in a room, and we started to play with computers. And at some point, he realized we started to explore different possibilities. And then at some point, Roberto realized that any archive could be a data set for training. And this opened up something that he couldn't expect. He had a lot of archives in his mind in the past that he wanted to use, but he didn't know how. And then I said, so I can use this archive of trip reports with the AI? I said, yes, of course you can. So we took this shroomery.org, which is a repository of people who just write psychedelic stories of when they ate mushrooms, basically. And so there are thousands of these trip reports. And then in 2021, we hallucinated an AI. This was the narrative. And then at that time, in the scientific field, there was nothing about hallucination. Now hallucination is a keyword, of course, in AI about for describing answers that seem true, but they are not true. But at that time, Roberto had this intuition, the artist had this intuition without knowing anything about artificial intelligence or science, that hallucination was something meaningful about machines, that we could show that they were infallible. And then 2 years after, Sam Altman came up with this, in one conference. I was quite impressed because he came out with this idea. Since ChatGPT and any large language model, for what I know, is capable of not hallucinating because it's a probabilistic system, these tech companies cannot deal with hallucinations and cannot deal. How can I deal with that? Because it must be marketable, profitable, because I want people to buy my technology, but if they say bullshit, then maybe it's a problem. So while Sam Altman in that conversation said, maybe we should see hallucinations as features and not as bugs, I was quite impressed that he said that, and that's a live. It's online the interview, so you can have that, and it was a quite interesting contradiction. So while tech companies cannot deal with these contradictions, artists can, and I think that this match can really help to accept the fact that errors are part of machines, of AI, and we have to embed errors in what we do when we understand things.
And if I may add, of humans as well.
And of course of humans, yeah.
Well, let's go back then on the other side of Atlantic. Vesna, you've been experimenting with numerous formats, numerous programs, residencies, summer schools, and then at some point you decided to reinvent this STEAM approach. You preserved S, T, and A.
I preserved all of it, so it's still STEAM, and it's a kind of a manifesto that came out of. First, I have to admit, I was very resistant to STEM. Apologies to Pedro. Because I felt that, like many of us artists working since the 90s in technology and media arts, where is the art, right? And the complaints eventually kind of got to Silicon Valley, and art was as an afterthought put in and it was made into STEAM, which also has a kind of a sexy feeling, like it's so STEAM. And I still felt resistant because it felt so manufactured for the industry and job skills, etc. And the artists were just there as an afterthought. But because so many of our students actually came from STEM fields, And we're really curious and thirsty and hungry for arts and creativity and just working with their peers and trying to cross those boundaries and not feeling like, I don't want to be just in the sciences, I want to be in the arts and vice versa. I started rethinking it, and here's what it is. So science, yes, but we need to ask, why is it so materialistic? And I'll just stop there because we're doing rapid response. I could go on about this for an hour. Technology, yes, but what kind of technology are we talking about? So mushrooms could be a technology. We could just go on and indigenous technologies. Our bodies are technologies. All that's been developing for billions of years. Why are we thinking of computers that are about 50 years old, maybe a little more, as the technology? So question mark on those two. Engineering, that belongs in science and technology. So let's put that into science and technology, because they need engineering. And by the way, engineering on its own as a reductionist thing is a big problem, but we won't go there either. So then we change that into ecology. And when we're talking about the E being ecology instead of engineering, we're talking about ecology of this room, for instance, of the people sitting here, of our consciousness right now. We're thinking of ecology of these poor sunflowers that are all over the place, and etc. So we're changing engineering to ecology. Arts, we keep it because we know what arts are. They're complicated and they come from many different angles. And then math belongs, take it, to science and technology. That's what it belongs. So science, technology, engineering, math are one thing. That if we took arts and started separating it, we could do the same thing. So that moves over, and instead it's mindfulness. To really stop and think about what are we doing. And it's really, really important, especially in these times when we're asking, should we panic? Maybe we stop and think and connect to each other in ways that are more and more prevalent. So it's become very much okay. It used to be, oh, that's new age woo-woo, but now we're seeing that there's a lot to be said about mindfulness, and we practice a lot of it in our classes. And so it's science, technology, ecology, arts, and mindfulness.
Thanks so much for that. And actually, you've been deploying that through different frameworks and different situations, mostly with young people, with young learners, young associates, young partners of that process. So, and I will start with Federico this time, because you've been also doing that line, artists, scientists, youth collaborations. Now we need somehow to actively involve them into the process. And you have experience with different co-creation approaches, co-designing, how to actually allow not only their voices, but also their active participation, sometimes even to motivate them to reach to them.
Yeah, but we thought a lot about that, how to involve young people, and we thought that one of the best way was to involve the cultural centers that involve young people. So we are starting now a process. It's quite pioneering, at least in Italy. I don't know in the rest of Europe. It's called Rigenerativa. We involve 100 cultural centers in Italy, and we're trying to and they own spaces. All these centers own spaces. And we're trying not to just to teach them how to use AI. Or these cultural centers are not technological centers. So most of the operators, most of the mediators, most of the don't know much about AI. Maybe they use them at a personal level, but how can they become mediators for other people? So we set up like a training course, but of course, as you all know, cultural centers are not any other teaching like target, because they want to know. They are very critical about stuff, and they want to know. And it's very important, and it's very interesting that they want to know. So this part of methodology is involving a co-design to, like, not just, let's say, teaching how to use a large language model or a text-to-image for some reasons, but first of all, why we are using it, which one should be used, because also the ethical concern, and all of that, after this this first part of understanding, we decided to go a step forth so that they all have a tool which is designed for them according to their desires, so that they can teach their communities, the youth communities, how to engage with this technology. So this process will be 1.5-year process. We have just started, and we will have this tool ready in June, created by all the cultural center, that they will be like the mediators to hopefully thousand and thousand people to understand not just how to use ChatGPT, but why you are using that model on the back, which maybe will not be ChatGPT, and when do you have to use it and what for.
Yes, yes. Thank you. Thanks for that. And Vesna, going back to you, you've been also setting different programs with different models of learning. And then, what are your experiences? How you were involving, inspiring young people?
So the best example I can give is our SciArt summer program, which ran since 2006. That's meant for high school students to come just before they go to the university. And mostly, actually, it turns out to be mostly science students, about a third in the arts and humanities. And we teach for 10 days, very intensive, where they stay in the university and they live kind of the university life, but it's designed in a way that I would have loved to teach if I wasn't in the typical, program and curriculum. And those 10 days become this kind of intensive cross-pollinating of everything, where there's just no disciplines and everything, to change the way they approach a university when they enter. Mm-hmm. And it's been super successful on many levels. Over the years, we've also watched students where they go, and it's just incredible. Plus, they would get college credits. So in 10 weeks, in 10 days, they do what we would do in 10 weeks. And they really do. No dumbing down, totally even more intense. That program, unfortunately, was stopped this year. So there's no more, but there's that experience, and there's all those students that we have taught all those years who are out there. So there's definitely hope. And then another example is a class that I taught for about 10 years that's called Biotech and Art, to honor students. Now, for those of you who don't know, honor students are pretty much the A+ students. So you walk into a classroom, they're all there early, and they all want to achieve, and they're all ready to learn. Their final project, I asked them, out of all the topics we covered, and we really do kind of a survey course, what is it that you find the most interesting? And that's why I come to you. They all were interested into fungi, mycelium, etc. So I ended up with 33 essays by honor students from their perspective. So if it was economy student, economy, mycelium, if it was a pre-med, medical and fungi, health issues, etc., etc. And then I brought in my friends and artists who work in this to create a textbook. So this would be the third textbook that honor students have created that are left behind. One is on plastic, this one is on mushrooms, another one is Introduction to Biotech and Art. And those are legacies. Again, this course was also just shut down. They told me it's not essential. So I asked, well, what is essential? I got no answer. But anyway, the legacy is there. And I think this is really what's important now. What has been happening up to now, where we have created people who can carry on a type of frame of mind and respond to whatever happens, because we don't know. Yeah. We can't predict. We can try, but we can't.
Okay. Thanks for that. And speaking about legacies, Pedro, your work spanned from teaching at university through those national programs that you already mentioned in Portugal to actually coordinating the whole year of astronomy back in 2009. So actually such a diverse experience in different environments. So what are the takeaways, and also did you identify changes with young people in all that time behind?
That's a good question. I think what we I'll focus more again on the topic of the discussion today, and I think what we can see, especially with teenagers, is a bit more on the opportunities for learning on topics that they really care about or they are really important in their local communities. So I think where we can see some of very good results in terms of motivation, and I would say mainly agency, because I think we're talking a lot about agency of these young people to change something in their lives, in their communities, is when they can work on challenge-based or mission-based projects where they really try to solve a real problem through science, technology, arts, ecology, and mindfulness. And it can be several examples, right? And I think approaches like citizen science, where they really are the ones collecting the data, they do the analysis, they get to their own conclusions, they even bring these own conclusions to researchers or policymakers, and can be anything from light pollution in their community to plastics in the waterways. We see that this is what actually drives them, is this sense that they can contribute to the change and even achieve change during the learning process. And that's going to be tricky for education for the future. And it's super difficult to design this type of projects, but I think that's where our focus should go.
Great, thanks. So belonging, ownership, participation.
And change.
Change.
Yeah.
Thanks for that. Let's then conclude this formal segment with your words, and let's then give opportunity to the audience to pose some questions to our speakers here. So the microphone should be somewhere around.
I can give you one first.
Yeah. Do we have any questions here? Anyone wants to try? Yes, here we have one.
Hello, Maya from Pina, Slovenia. Actually, really interesting debate. I would be interested, can you share with us maybe some very concrete methodologies that you are using? Because talking about learning environments and also the world we live in, where we know that the focus of young people is really fading away, also ours is, I think. And I think it really, like, as being an educator myself, it's really challenging, like how to structure the learning processes that actually engage students to the point where they don't feel bored, where they're actually like, where we are still following, as the non-formal education has really strict learning outcomes, still just the way how we are doing it is a bit different. Can you share like few of the methodologies that you are using in order to assure this environments?
You're asking all of us.
Yeah, I have an example about demystification. We work with this artistic duo. We produced this work called The Models. And in February, we invited 4 classes for just 2 hours. And what we did was, at first, you see the show. And you get you take wonder. You expect wonder from the people, from the students, and then they are ready to create questions. So there was a 15 meters screen at that time, and with masks of artificial masks of commedia dell'arte, and mainly they didn't understand much. But that's a very fundamental point. If you create wonder and not understanding, then you can start with questions. After that, we opened the questions, and after the question, we went to unpack all the large language models that were used, and we gave them a task. So how do you build a commedia dell'arte mask with some traits that show the traits of on the back of large language models? So you start from, then I can go forth, but you start from wonder, and from not really understanding but being curious, and then you take their questions, and then you unpack the back box with more technical stuff so that they can engage with that, and go back to the wonder, which is not wonder anymore, but fully understanding.
So are you asking, which context are you asking for? Because it would be a different methodology if it was in an academic context with semester restrictions, or here at Ars Electronica, or a workshop. You wouldn't have the same cookie cutter approach. So there's some constraints, obvious constraints in academia. Is that what your context?
Actually interested, like if you have all the three approaches, like how you
All the three approaches, okay.
how you are also maybe using like if you are using like the workshop approaches also in the university context.
Got it, okay. So very quickly, because rapid response. For the academic, I personally, I'll give my example. I create a structure, what needs to be accomplished and what needs to be taught or learned. And then I don't give the students the curriculum or the syllabus until I meet them the first day. Then I make notes, I learn who they are, what they want, what their background is, what their vibe is, what the chemistry is, go back to the drawing table and fill in the dots, and then give them the curriculum. That's academic context. So it still, completes what you're supposed to do, but you're doing it differently for every group. So it's not like you're teaching the same class to every group, but you're teaching the same topic. For a non-academic context, as an artist, I try to create works that sometimes take 3 to 5 years that create a sense of wonder and questioning, and then the workshops are related to the artwork. So a lot of times the work would take like 3 to 5 years. Santiago is here, he knows I've worked on the Alien Stardust project, which was also here at the Museum of Natural History. And the project was very much an art project, poetic, but it took a lot of research. It took me almost 2 years before I developed it, and then another years with the audiences. So the workshop becomes about unpacking what goes into it, introducing them to the scientists who are part of it, showing them stuff in the museum that's related to it. Really, I think the projects that are dealing with the topic that you're interested in, with artists who are seriously doing research and collaboration, offer such a rich place for education. A lot of times neglected, by the way. A lot of times these works stay on that level and it somehow doesn't go into the workshop mode. But I personally like doing it. I like showing what's under the hood, you know? It's the way to teach. So we agree, wonder.
Maybe you give chance to other people to ask questions. And I'll be happy to talk with more afterwards.
Yes, thanks. Do we have some more questions? Yes, over there.
Andrew doesn't ask a question. He asks afterwards.
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for the conversation. Okay, I was trying. Okay, so my question is more like all the conversation was obviously focused for the younger generations, all focused on schools, primary schools, universities. But I also believe that in going with this title as well, that the older generations needs, especially in these times, a rapid learning environment. So I would like to know your opinion, or how do you face this, to not only focus in the younger generations, which I do believe, and myself I support a lot, that they are the future, and they are the ones who are going to save us, if you want to say it in that way. But what about now? What about the older generations? Do you have some strategies, or mainly I'm interested in your thoughts. What do you think about that?
Anyone?
I'll just say that thank you, Santiago, for bringing that up, because intergenerational is really the key. It truly is. And a lot of the politics that we're dealing with is actually with the problem of a pretty old generation trying to go back in time. So to come up with strategies where it's open to intergenerational communication, I think is key. And I really appreciate that question. I don't have an exact answer, but just being open to it is really important.
Well,
yeah. I'm not sure it's a way of teaching, but it's a way of including them. What we did many times with AI was, for instance, to collect analog data at the market to old people with board games, so that we could involve them and not leaving them apart from the data set that we were building, and explaining them that all these card games that they were doing at the market were useful to train computers. So they are not going to be developers if they are 65, I believe. But, so they need to understand at least what a data set is. So it's it's not a full answer of teaching a course to a 6 years old person, but maybe also 6 years old people are used to attend classes. If they want to learn how to use a large language model or to write a prompt, they will go to the popular university and follow a specific course. But if you want like a rapid learning thing, I think you go to the market and you show how analog things can then enter the digital.
Yeah.
Maybe I think one of the, Santiago, thank you for the question, because I think this lifelong learning is one of the big challenges and it's a big topic in terms of education. And I think there, in terms of, as someone working more in science and technology, I think the cultural institutions and partnership with cultural institutions can be a very good way to also bring this knowledge into more older generations. Clearly, museums, art centers, these type of organizations do manage to attract older generations. And I think that can be really an interesting place for more the science and technology communities can engage and make sure that we can still bring the population through these very important topics, current topics in technology and science.
Yeah, and if I may also join this segment through another project called European Digital Deal, which is also featured here. We did a residency project called Resonant Memories, addressing digital divide gap in Serbia in this time, in order to collect memory and perspectives of older generations in this overwhelming digital environment, digital realities. And also at some point to to collide them with perspectives of younger people in order to establish some kind of dialogue, of constant and active exchange. And actually it will be premiered in October this year. So, but there are also some similar projects visible here at the festival. So we don't have time for one more question, or do we have time for one more question? Or it was a question, yes, over here, yeah.
Hi, thank you very much for the wonderful discussion. So I was wondering, what are your thoughts, or how do you address the increasing gamification of, for example, AI tools and so on and so forth, especially in the framework of rapid response learning? And do you also discuss addiction as part of that strategy? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's for you. It's clearly for you.
I will start from a work that I saw in the team exhibition. I saw it yesterday. It's like a real engine video game thing where at some point there's a virus and like gender changes, or not gender habits changes, and men start to dance as they wouldn't dance, like constructors start dance as they wouldn't dance. I think that I have some friends, some artists that really like to enter live video games and create a mess inside that. And this is what, like, it's not really gamification, it's playing with video games. So gamification can be sometimes a strange entrance point, because it's already old in what, I mean, young people understand gamification as, you look young. But you're not really. This is my feeling. So gamification, I have the feeling, is good for elder people, but you have to play with them instead of using gamification. This is my feeling.
Not enough time. So I'll just say addiction is a really big thing to address, not only in games, but in the phones, in any kind of technology. And I put a challenge to my students and friends, intergenerational, by the way, to 24 hours completely unplug. And you would think it would be easier, it's easy for a few people, but many fail. And then we have really interesting discussions why, and what happened, and how did you feel. They talk about phantom limbs and all kinds of crazy stuff, but Gamification is a whole nother can of worms, which we don't have time for, but addiction is the key word.
Thanks for that. Please keep it extremely quickly. We also promised some commitments here.
Oh.
To close. Vesna, yes. You mentioned dreaming about being outside academia.
Oh, dreaming. So I'm not dreaming, actually. The question was, what is my dream outside of academia? It's not a dream. I really feel that I'm already one foot outside of it, and the other foot is being pushed by the very system. So I'm just going to be in the present moment and see what happens.
Okay. So adapting and then learning outside.
Absolutely. Well, that's a given.
Okay.
That's a given.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Pedro, your perspective?
Like final words?
Yes, final words.
I think you were saying that that's a difficult one. I think we need to focus not so much on the future, but we have to focus on the present. Now say that be in the thick of it and not try to say that it's going to be better. We need to address it now.
Yeah, thanks. Federico?
Yeah, I would just say let's be less smart and more smart.
Great, excellent. Well, instead of making any conclusion, I would just like you to invite to visit U19 section and explore awarded projects and also many others. Because yesterday we've seen some of them, 9-year-old girl creating its own generative AI video about her visionary environments, young teenage girls about discussing perspective and position of women in modern world. Nowadays, a bit older teenagers assessing Austrian political systems and promises given by politicians in this country. And finally, the awarded work, which I don't know how to explain, but something with mushrooms and trips, but super impressive, really. So thank you for your attention. It was a pleasure, guys. Thank you.
On the stage, one discussion follows the other discussion. For the next round, I want to raise another question. It's what happens when we move beyond including young people into existing systems instead of co-creating new systems for them and them in the center. This discussion is moderated by my colleague Andrew Newman. Andrew is involved in major European collaborations that reimagine education, from Open Science Hub to Critical Change Lab. And he also co-founded the Research Institute for Art and Technology. But Andrew will also be joined by Eva Vasseur, from Future Lab's Maker Education Lab in Amsterdam. She works on projects like Critical Making, which shows how young people can use hands-on activities to explore ethics, care, and justice. She empowers learners to become reflective makers. Thank you for that. That's a beautiful work you do. And also Louise Archer from University College London. She's a leading expert, she's a sociologist and a leading expert in equity in STEM education. Her concept of science capital has reshaped how educators understand youth engagement in science. She leads the Making Space project, investigating how informal settings like makerspaces can cultivate a sense of belonging and agency among the under-respected youth. So please, Andrew, the stage is yours.
So it's really fantastic to follow that panel discussion on rapid response learning environments. So I think we're going to talk about something that got brought up there, and one of the things that I remember when Pedro was mentioning how when you think about a rapid response learning environment, you know, there's like a SWAT team, or I like to imagine, because we're going to be discussing STEAM, a steamroller breaking down a wall and say, hey, here, we can like inspire you, we can make change, we can do it all together. And one of the key issues that he sort of brought up, you can't do this without having created a community first, without having those relationships of trust, and very much the sense of belonging for the young people. And so these were kind of what we're going to explore today within the realm of like maker education, radical making, critical making, these ideas of equity and inclusion, and how do we move forward towards that, to co-creation. But as I was like discussing with Victoria earlier, about the situation in the US and these blacklisted words, including equity and inclusion. What does this mean when we can't do projects that refer to this? And I was immediately thinking about, okay, it's clear, what do they want when they don't want equities? You know, they don't want people to be equal. They want there to be clear hierarchies of power. And what do they mean when they don't want inclusion? They don't want people to be able to access everything. They want people to be left out. This is what they mean by that. And one of the key words that I also kind of always bring alongside these notions of equity and inclusion is agency. And then I was trying to think about, okay, wait a minute, what am I talking about when I'm talking about the opposite of agency? And I was like, I couldn't really sort of like work it out. So I looked up the synonyms, the opposite of agency, and these are the words that come up. It's like idleness, ineptness, impotence, inertia, inactivity, stagnation, and my favorite one, end. So when we're talking about agency, we want to talk about starting something, we want to talk about making something, we want to talk about making an impact. And I also kind of like very much thinking about like, what does it mean to make? Because we're talking about today, how do we make change? How do we support young people to make change? How do we deal with this anxiety that's infiltrating the world? And I think about why making is important. And I think about my 3-year-old son, Elliot, who loves to craft, and that look in his eyes when he says, I made this. I made this. And I think very much that's something I want to talk about, what this mindset of making, how that changes the way you see the world. And I think I'll ask you, Eva, to kind of talk about what does it mean to think when you're making?
Thank you. Is my microphone on? No. Yeah, it's on. Thank you for this emotional introduction. I prepared something, but I want to say something else now. Because for me, I think you're absolutely right. We are like in this position where we have the agency to make something. And it reminds me of a children's book that I'm a really huge fan of, and it's about a boy named Jan. And Jan, he's like, he suddenly had the idea in the beginning of the book to write a story. I'm going to write a story, I'm going to write a book. And he started writing the book, and like in everyday life, he had a huge crush on the girl that was living in the neighbors, and she said, "Well, you can't write a book. Like a book is no use. Like it's just a story. Everybody can write a book, and it doesn't add anything to the world." And it really ends with his dad asking him, "How's your book going? Is it already finished?" And he says, "How can I finish my story? Like, it's my story. It's going on for life, for life, for life." Like, he's making every day. And he says, in Dutch, it's gebeuren. It's happening. Like, I'm happening every day. And for me, that's what making is. Like, you're making every day. You get up in the morning, you think, what am I going to make this day?
Louise, like you're a leading expert on equity and inclusion in STEM education, or if we think more broadly with STEAM. And I think very much this idea is like, how do we, when young people come into these spaces to think about like learning science, technology, or like tools to change, like how do they enter these spaces and feel that they they belong, that they heard, and like they have a rightful presence. And if you could also maybe introduce this idea to the audience as well.
Yeah, thanks. Is my mic working? Yeah. So rightful presence is, I think it's a really useful term. It comes from the sanctuary cities movement. So the idea of when people are asylum seekers or refugees and they come into cities, but the idea has been taken up and applied to STEAM contexts. So my colleague Angela Calabrese-Barton in the States has used it a lot. And it's really that idea of we're not just tolerating people and they're not just guests in the space. It's how we think about really supporting their agency, really making them full legitimate participants who've got action, who can help shape the agenda. So how do we make sure we value who they are and use that? And really it's about using that making, what young people want to make, what matters to them, what matters to their communities, and then really using that. And so that STEAM is the vehicle and not the destination. Often with STEM, we're always obsessed, that governments are obsessed with, we need more people in STEM, yes we do, but we actually need more diverse young people and we need more diverse forms of STEM and STEAM.
Eva, at the VAG Makerspace and generally with your maker education programs, sort of what sort of experiences and practices, how do you approach this idea of making sure that the young people feel listened to, that they have a ability to kind of like co-create the program of what they're doing in those spaces?
Yeah, we use a lot of different methods. And one of the projects that was on top of my mind was technological citizenship, a research project that we did. And it was about how to get this feeling of technological citizenship through maker education, so through creative processes. And the most interesting thing, I was involved as a researcher, and we interviewed all the students, like in the first session, while they were making. So that we were interviewing and making, and one thing that was very important, that they really felt seen, because we were asking them a lot of questions. And it wasn't a question like, how would you change the world? Or how would you solve all our problems? But the questions were more, who are you? And what is happening in your life? Like, what are you worried about? What are you happy about? Who are you? And I thought that was the most interesting question during the process of making as a method, to really try and onboard a project or a research project by seeing somebody.
Louise, could you maybe discuss the sort of impact that this encouraging this rightful presence, this ability of being seen has, and how it's changed the education system, or what difference does it make when young people are seen?
Thanks. I think, it makes a huge difference. So we've been lucky enough to work with wonderful partners across the world, in the UK, in the US, in Europe, over in Nepal, and in Gaza as well. And what we've seen is when the practitioners we've worked with have been really brave and have changed up what they do and opened it up and given up a bit of control, moving from kind of recipe book activities, that really that's when the young people's agency gets to come to the fore, and they're creating things that we as adults we wouldn't have expected them or known that they want to make. So it's really then shifting practice, so how we see ourselves, so your professional identity with it. Some people who are some of the practitioners we work with would say, well, I know I'm really good at teaching young people STEM. I can teach them how to make a circuit or whatever it happens to be. But that didn't necessarily mean that they were equitable. And I think it's when we see those shifts in how practitioners can say, actually, I'm going to stop and listen and think and learn, then that creates the conditions within which we see absolutely fantastic things that young people can make.
Eva, do you want to maybe discuss some of the fantastic things young people have made, in your experience with projects, that you might not have expected, that when they were given the opportunity to sort of choose, to decide, to make their own path, that you didn't see coming?
Good question, because I think I never see it coming. When we are working with young people, and because I think I kind of agree with the idea that we should let go more often. Like we're always trying to stay in control and try to control a process. And especially with younger people, they are in this school system where they are like, you're talking about a professional identity, but you have like this student identity. This is your level, this is the group where you belong to, this is your class, this is... And to really break that open, I think that is the most interesting way of educating and creating like third spaces. Like this is a space where we have other rules together, where we communicate differently than what you're used to, and that makes it easier to open up sometimes. And then like everything that people create is a surprise and mainly for themselves.
Some sort of like traditionalists or boomers might say, if we just let go, they're just going to leave the room and they're not going to learn anything. Why isn't that the case, Louise?
I think, creativity, you need space and opportunity and the permission to bring that inspiration to it. So I think, so we've worked with a range of makerspaces, and some of them did have quite traditional programs, but when they opened it up more, they were seeing, for example, young people bringing what mattered to them. So there was, example, in one space, a young man who'd got a history of homelessness, and he said, what I want to make is a stylish fold-out bed backpack that you can carry around, put it down, and so the centre wouldn't have known to make that. We've got other young people coming up with all sorts of things related to their lives as well. So, for example, our partners in Gaza, before they started working with us several years ago, they would do quite traditional programs, and then we worked with them and they decided to open up more, and they decided to put on a mothers and daughters design workshop. There is a slide going to come up at some point showing that. But they came together and they discussed the inequalities they faced as girls and women. They decided they wanted to design sustainable, safer cities. They wanted to make their streets and neighbourhoods safer for them. And they made a fantastic, oh, there we go, it's just gone. They made a fantastic model, and ironically, focusing on safer cities. Then obviously the attacks happened in October and the subsequent war and genocide, and the space has been completely destroyed. Many of the young people that we co-researched with have been killed. The practitioners have been displaced, but they're still working on this. They're still massively committed, and you can say, what difference does making make? For them, this is hugely important. Equity is hugely important. And we then discussed with them how to represent what they'd been doing. And there is one of the slides will show a tent which has pictures of the young people and the practitioners doing their making. And they said to us, we want people to see this. We want people to know our names, we want them to know our humanity, we want them to see our creativity and what we're making. And hopefully at some point that will be able to be, those ideas will come back into the policy agenda.
Yeah, I think it's like this idea of like, but if we just let them be, then they will leave the classroom, they'll leave the learning space. And what you're just describing there, that is exactly what we see them do. We see them leaving the classroom and going out into the world and actually making real change and fighting against like the injustice and the inequity they sort of come across. And I want to then explore a bit more this idea of like how sort of can making like serve as a form of resistance. Like we have in the title here this notion of radical making, but like how can making sort of like be a way of pushing back like these sort of like extractive technologies and systems, these things that like feed into these young people often. How can making be a form of resistance?
Well, it can be a form of resistance against our big tech bros that are controlling our daily lives, and especially also controlling young people's daily lives, although I'm addicted to everything that's coming my way as well. But and I think there's like the sense of agency and the idea of making, that you understand that it's all made by people with a purpose. There are choices that are made in this technology that affect you and affect your daily life. And the idea that you can change that you have like all these platforms where you can make it yourself and build on your own values and build on your own choices. I think that's what agency is, and that's pushing back.
Louise, if you could sort of design your sort of ideal space or learning environment, this maker space where like resistance, where action and activism, where there is critical change, what would that space, what would that environment feel like? Could you sort of daydream a little bit here?
Thanks. So I think it would definitely be a co-created space. So I think all the spaces we see that are, we would say, the most inclusive and equitable are co-made, literally down to the fabric of what's on the wall, what's represented, how is it organised. It's been co-designed. So young people in one space have said, well, we want a sofa because we come in and we're really tired and we need somewhere just to relax before we engage in the session. So it has to be localised, it needs to be personalised, the young people, and co-created. But I think more than that, it's about the mindset. So we've worked with lots of practitioners from across the world, and really the most powerful thing is not what you do, but how and why you're doing it. And where you develop that equity mindset, where practitioners really understand equity issues or are on their journey to understand them, and really where they're doing critical reflective practice, that's what makes the difference, because that's the thing that structures what you do and how you do it, and really particularly threading it through everything. So it's not just what you do in the activity or the session or the classroom, it's how you think about your governance. Who's in charge? Who makes the decisions? Where are the different communities in that? How's your access and outreach done? How is your pedagogy done? And really it's where equity issues are embedded in that it's really powerful. But to get there, you really need to go through some discomfort. So I think a really productive space, making a space, is also one where people are comfortable with being uncomfortable and constantly questioning.
This constant questioning, I think, is very important. We haven't really touched on it yet. When we talk about critical making or radical making, this reflective thinking. And I think this capacity to sort of also for the young people to see where they are often can really needs to be encouraged with these processes. And would you like to sort of describe, Eva, a bit about sort of like critical making and how you kind of embed this reflectiveness in everything that's sort of done in the maker education?
Yeah, if you look at the pictures behind me, that's wearable uniforms, costumes that they were 15, 16-year-old made. And they had, like, the assignment was to really make a statement with the clothes you wear, and they could really use like all kinds of materials and design a costume for themselves that was a statement where they believed in or reflected their identity. And I think that there was not much questioning needed, because like there was one question, and once they felt that they had agency of the process themselves and they could do what they want, and we built, like, they had the classroom, and on the hallway we built this huge atelier with lots of materials, sewing machines, 3D printers, everything, and they could just do it, and they had hours of making there what they wanted to make and what they wanted to, and the statement they wanted to tell the world. That was enough.
Yeah, I think it's a very important thing. My 3-year-old is still not so great at the reflective making. When I ask him why, or how does it make you feel, or what do you want it to do, what shouldn't it do, still hasn't quite got the answers yet. So I think it's something I could learn a bit from you on.
Maybe you should try something else than language.
Yeah.
It helps.
Yeah, I think maybe that's a good sort of like segue also to kind of talk about something else than language. Louise, have you kind of any experiences of like how to encourage this embodied learning and like how to kind of create the spaces? You mentioned making sure people are comfortable, but like how do you do this without language again? Sort of like what is some sort of cues that the educators in the room could maybe like read to sort of understand what young people are wanting without explicitly saying it?
Oh, that's a tough question. I mean, I think for us, one of the key things is relationships. So it's not just the activity of making, and it's not just providing the equipment or whatever it happens to be, but how do you build those relationships so you really understand who you're working with and what they want and need. And ideally, we're not just delivering sessions where we have to guess what people want, but actually we're co-designing it with them. So some of the spaces we work with, they don't just sit and plan all their programs, they work with young people and both overall to plan it, but also at the end of each session, feeding in for the next time. So again, that real sort of loosening up of control, I think helps develop more richer, which can be more embodied, more meaningful, more equitable opportunities for sort of STEAM-rich making.
Eva, do you have anything to add, like from your experiences or?
Well, I think like we're currently in a project where we use live arts with vocational students, and that's quite like far away from their own environment. It's you have to choose something that they can like identify with, but gives them a chance to open up their mind. So one part is identifying yourself with something, and it's just like walking in the bunker. Like some artworks are really like, oh, I feel this. Like this is, I understand what it is, or I understand what it can be. But it also teaches me something. So it's like you need a balance between being a part of their environment and like giving them something new.
Yeah, I think like this also this notion of like it's about building the relationships, and that was kind of brought up in our the session earlier about creating the communities, and I think like we're talking a lot about this idealized way, but there's a lot of pushback, and there's a lot of challenges to kind of actually create these spaces. And I think sort of would like to sort of like end on a prompt of like what sort of like policies, practices, or pedagogies like do you think we need to sort of like get to this vision of like makerspaces as like a site of democratic rebellion? And I think also on the one side, like what are the what do you think we need, and what are the challenges that you have right now as well? Maybe I'll start with you, Eva.
Yeah, I think it's very important to understand what democracy is, and it's like it's this constant process, because it's democracy is like this really abstract thing, and we teach children in school about our government and the voting system and how. But democracy is way more than that. Like I always tell the students in the class that. The quote of Hannah Arendt, the political philosopher, and she says we're all born unequal, but we organize for equity, and that's something that they really relate to, because they understand what that is. Like there's no equity in the classroom. There is no equity in the classroom, but you have to organize it and you have to work for it. Every single one of the students has to work for that, and I think that's so important to realize that it's not something that is far away or that will affect you when you're an adult, but it's something that you have to work on now.
Louise.
Thanks. I definitely would like funders and other sorts of governments and people to actually value a broader range of outcomes, and to really value agency as an outcome, and not just count numbers and require organisations to get a certain number of people through their door and tick in a kind of superficial way, because that drives less helpful forms of practice. And I also think we shouldn't expect practitioners to just know what to do. This is complex, it's difficult. In our projects, we've been working for years to try and co-design free, accessible resources, thinking tools to support equitable and inclusive practice. So if you're interested in that and want them, they're all on our websites, but they're really just ways and tools to help you interrogate your practice, to think about it through an equity lens, and then put that into practice and track how you're doing. And I think if we could get a context which values professional development as well and supports it, that would be super helpful.
Well, thank you very much. I might open up the floor for any questions. Does anyone have any questions for Louise or Eva?
Thank you very much for the very interesting presentation. I want to ask you about funding, because my feeling is that funding for not culture, but this kind of radical activities is becoming a little bit less and less. And often funding requires big activities, as you were mentioning now, big numbers. But I feel that these kind of radical and important activities are very important also in small groups. Sometimes small groups are even more important because they can easier build relation and trust, which is also important for transformative action. So, yeah, how do you fund, or what is your feeling about funding these kind of activities and projects?
Thanks. I think that's a really good question. In an ideal world, I'd like us to do more work to educate funders into what would be a more impactful way of funding work and longer term work as well, not just one-offs. But I also would say that lots of the organisations we worked with are very good at subverting their existing funding. They're good at playing the game, and I have no problem with if you have to write an application and you get funding to do work, and you can do quite a lot within often those boundaries as well. And we've seen people being really creative and doing, I mean, the work we're talking about has come from a mixture of funding sources, and a lot of it is a creative response.
Anything you would like to add, Eva?
Yeah, well, I think it's not always if you want to play the game, then you don't always show what kind of radical rebel things you are going to do. So sometimes it's better to just, like, there are a lot of funders who think it's important, knowledge about democracy or consciousness about democracy, and also about technological citizenship. It's like the technological skills, but also the more citizenship skills. Funders find it very important as well. And it's like the way you write it or the way you reach it, that you might need to play the game sometimes to do what you would like to do.
I might add, like, you know, this project, Critical Change Lab, is an EU-funded project, and sort of we've had like 150, 160 sort of like workshops with schools, and really being able to sort of, you know, spark this thing, and especially working with the teachers alongside in those schools. The problem that I find often with the funding is like this project-based model, and that there's like, that these sparks come out, but to keep that flame going is the struggle. And I think what Louise was bringing up about sort of like also the sort of professional growth and teacher training as well, there is something very sort of, there's a bleak, empty landscape often across all of the sort of local educational areas in Europe for being able to support teachers that are doing this job day in and day out. So I think in the last panel it was brought up, like, you know, there was the question of, you know, should we panic? And like teachers are saying, yes, panic. And I know that teachers are really, really struggling, and I think that's something that needs to be change, like on a fundamental sort of like government, like the national government levels and the local governments, because what the European Union funding can't do that. That's something that needs to be done at home, and I think that's one thing that really needs to change. Sorry.
I wanted to ask a question, just following on what you just said, because I see you're from Australia. I am too, but I also live in Austria as well, because my mum's from Austria, and we travel around globally actually presenting at schools as well, and we see the fundamental shift between teachers in different countries. We present at a lot of international schools which have the same curriculum, but what's your take on how you can answer this in a creative way, because how the environment for teachers can change in different schools in different countries. But do you think there's like, which school have you gone to where you see like students and teachers thrive together? And what system have they created to do that? So, supporting students, giving them a voice, but also making it so teachers are mentors instead of just lecturers.
Yeah, I mean, that's a difficult question to answer, but I would say like, usually like sort of often in this like alternative pedagogical schools that have that sort of environment. So where they you know, they've been able to like, you know, if you look at the sort of the Steiner schools or the Montessori as well, there is that kind of respect and sense of belonging with the students kind of embedded in those schools very often. And I think also the schools where teachers have a lot more sort of flexibility and freedom. So when the teachers are very often having to sort of like run through like a very sort of like confined curriculum, then there's that relationship between the teachers and the students. That sense of belonging's not there, because we were talking about agency of young people often, but we also need to talk about the agency of the teachers and the adults there, and understand that they're individuals as well, and they have ideas and they have ways of working. And I think that's one thing that's very lacking, usually in sort of like the state, like not just in Austria, across the world, like when you have like the state mandated like curricula and education, that kind of places emphasis on teachers to be sort of like, you know, where we had the conference yesterday about like AI and education, to basically be these bots, to just like replay the recipes that they've been given. And I think that's something we also need to think about when we talk about agency, is that we need to give teachers the agency. But I think...
Yeah, if I founded a primary school like 10 years ago, and I've been a principal about 6-7 years, and I thought it was especially agency. That's like give teachers the agency of what would you like to teach the children, what do you need? But it's also facilitation, like you don't as a teacher, because many of the systems are like the government gives money and then they have to find out how to spend it, but with a lot of objectives at the end. And I think it's also really good if you have a question like, should we still trust big tech in our school system? That's not a question that that a teacher should worry about. That's like something that has to be facilitated by government. So it's like it's on the one hand, it's absolutely agency, give teachers the agency, but on the other hand, facilitate like what's not that pedagogical important, but facilitate all the systems around it.
Well, super quickly, I'd say sociologically, most formal education is set up to reproduce social inequalities. So in that sense, it's very efficient at what it does. But I think resistance is always possible. There are always spaces of resistance. But I think the key to it is making equity central to everything. Because where bits are cut off, like, oh, curriculum, that's not about equity. The default is not neutral. The default is always the reproduction of inequality. So unless it's going through absolutely everything, like a British stick of rock, but that metaphor may not translate, it's going to be problematic.
So we have gone over time, but I would like to thank you both for this really great discussion.
Thank you.
You can please follow up and get more resources from the VAGs participating in the Critical Change Lab project, so the Critical Change Lab website, and also from Louise from Making Spaces. There's a lot of resources up there, and I think this evaluation framework as well is something that's really great for those funding applications as well. So thank you, everyone, and thank you, Evan and Louise.
Thank you for this highly interesting talk. So we slowly close the afternoon with practitioners, the ones who are immediate in contact with the youth, which are immediate creating experiences or building tools for the youth, helping them to shape and to hack the world. Josh Howell is a multidisciplinary researcher and artist whose work spans through computer science, fine arts, and philosophy. At his Tactical Space Lab in Australia, he leads a unique studio program where artists explore XR, games, and immersive media. Josh is known for subverting digital tools and make a complex system visible and negotiable. Nicoletta Tranquillo is a cultural organizer and economist. She's working in the intersection of climate, creativity, and community. She's co-founder of Kilowatt and cultural director of Sierra Madre, an ecological cultural center in Bologna. Her work is dedicated to fostering ecological imagination and bringing art and science together to challenge extractive narratives and design post-carbon futures. Sonja Beiler has a background in educational science and experience from historic institutions like Historic Royal Palace in London, in Salzburg, but as well at the Ars Electronica Center. Sonja is part of my team at the Education and Content Development crew, where she designs participatory programs and help young people to get in contact with emerging technologies and also to reflect their impacts on society. In this presentation today, Sonja will concentrate on our this year's inclusive projects. We decided to introduce you explicitly to those because I think talking about democratic vision, about change, about disruption, we have to come to a point where radical inclusion is an indiscussable integral. So please welcome Josh, Nicolette, and Sonja. Take a seat. Josh, you can go here to do your presentation.
Mine is the first one.
Okay, then Nicoletta, take this slot.
Okay, so thank you very much for having me here. I'm Nicoletta Tranquillo, and before starting to tell you more about this School of Mediterranean Ecological Imagination, I want to share with you a few facts, which I image you may know, but are very important for then understanding the context. The first one is that 2024 was the first warmest year ever recorded. So the temperature was plus 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial level. You probably have read about it. And this temperature, so plus 1.5, is exactly what 10 years ago with the Paris Agreement, the government have signed this agreement to try not to achieve this temperature before the end of the century. But unfortunately, it seems that we are already there. So no panic, or yes, panic. And the Mediterranean area is a climate change hotspot. So it's an area where the temperature and also the ecosystem are changing even faster than in other areas in Europe. And another thing that maybe you have been thinking about and you know is that ecological crisis is first of all, or also a cultural crisis, and is a crisis of imagination. So you have probably heard about this famous sentence by Mark Fisher that says it's easier to imagine the end of the world than the end of capitalism. So he probably started to think about what we are discussing today and in this edition of Ars Electronica a few years before. So this context that he called capitalism realism is exactly a mental cage that is blocking us to imagine different solutions. And that's something that we see every day, because environmental norms, environmental laws often use the same market mechanism that have caused these problems. So exactly in this framework, in 2023, we launched in Bologna this School of Mediterranean Ecological Imagination. That is we like to call it a laboratory of possible worlds. And it's a 5 days immersive camp based on some important pillars for us. First of all, transdisciplinary learning path based on collaboration between art and science, because it's very important to merge these kind of epistemologies. A mix of intellectual, spiritual, and bodily practices in order to mix way of learnings. We learn with our mind, but we learn with our bodies as well. And very often our bodies is just like taken out from the scene because we are all like mentally engaged. Then it's very important for us to have an intersectional approach in order to unveil power structures behind the problems. We talk about CO2 emissions, CO2 concentration, but we should talk about the power structure behind CO2 production, which is very important. And then another important aspect is we try to build in these 5 days immersive camp a community, not only of human beings, but a more than human community. Another aspect very important is that this school is designed a little bit like a gym. We try to go to train people, young people that come, to go beyond techno-solutionist trap. So this idea that technology will save us and somehow we can keep, behaving in the same way because then solution will save us. And so we try to create the right environment to train people to ask the right questions. Because when we panic, we try to run to solutions, but sometimes solutions keep in place the same power structure, the same injustice situation. So we think that is very important right now to make the right problem framing before running to solution. So that's what we try to do. We try to teach or again create the right environment to see processes not as linear or mechanistic processes, but as circular or systemic processes. And in one word, we try to think as ecosystems, because these we think are the ingredient for alternative epistemologies, so alternative way of seeing the world and understanding the world. And this is what we think we need in order to have a real ecological transformation, not transition, but a real ecological transformation. And I think all the things we have discussed today are about ecology. Someone before said, no, also this room is an ecology. That's exactly what we think. Our pedagogic approach, we think we try to go beyond the posting education, as they call it. So the idea of people or young people like, empty vases to fill up with right knowledges, but we try to create an environment that help people to identify the biases that that are frames that we use to look at the world. So to identify those biases and try to go beyond in order not to reinforce the current social, economic, and ecological injustice. And we do it trying to, mix things that are already there, for example, agroecology or how oceans or forests work, and indigenous knowledge, of course, but also imagination, and artists are very important. So we try to merge, things in order to make people not to be scared, because maybe the change is too big, but we have to imagine that change and also tapping on something that already exists. So finally, why Mediterranean? Is not, of course, to build, a new hegemony from another side, but is to, to have another point of view, also on Europe, on things, to try to move the point of view, considering also the difficult situation where we are, trying to deconstruct, the colonial approach that we still have in Europe on bodies and resources. So Mediterranean is not just a sea, but is a living archive of coexistence, and also can be a different narrative to build different ideal futures. And just to end with agency, it's extremely important. We try to imagine with people that participate a multi-species and collective agency in order to allow people to go back to their community and to support this redefinition of ecological imaginary to their community, not thinking that the human being is the only one that shape society and shape the world around us, but we should find way of collaborating with also other species. And that's it. I didn't speak about the location where all these schools occur, but I mean, because I didn't have time, but I think it's very important also the environment, the location, the space, how it is designed. But you can check it out. The space is Serra Madre, so you can check it out yourself. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nicoletta. Sonia, it's your turn.
Thank you so much, Nicole, for your warm introduction, and thank you, Nicoletta, for that inspiring presentation of yours. I will be talking about our focus on inclusion in our educational approach last year and this year with the title Opening Doors, the Ars Electronica Center as a Catalyst for Inclusion. So a museum is not much more than a place of objects with explanations. It's a space where objects tell stories. It's a place of encounter, of social interaction, of exchange. And inclusion is one of our core values, and we emphasize that, of course, in our educational approach, in our educational programs. And we see inclusion, of course, as a huge part of democracy education, as our educational programs and museums in general should be open to everyone and accessible to everyone. And our focus on inclusion happened mostly in 2024-2025, when we launched 2 major projects as part of our educational mission. And I would like to talk to you about those 2 projects. The first one with the title Life Inclusive. Life Inclusive is an inclusive collaborative art project on creativity It's a collaboration between the Ars Electronica Center, the Ars Electronica Future Lab, and Anders Art. And the technology behind it was developed by the Ars Electronica Future Lab and Wacom as part of an ongoing partnership since 2022. And the main question of that project was, can our mind and body produce some type of ink whilst being in a creative process? So during that, the first phase of the project, we invited various artists with disabilities from different studios and institutions in Upper Austria to visit the Ars Electronica Center. And we did a guided tour through the center, and the idea was to familiarize them with the technology used throughout the project. And in the second phase, some team members of us from the center and from the Future Lab, we visited those studios and we recorded the artists during their creative processes with using live ink technology. So what is live ink technology? So you can see here on the picture, this gentleman is wearing a wearable, like a gear, with consisting of different straps attached to the body with different sensors. And those sensors measure different activities like brain waves, dermal activities, eye activity, and those signals are translated into a graphic visualization, which you can see on that screen. And of course, the colors have different meanings. You can interpret a lot into those visualizations. And we created stills out of those visualizations, and they were showcased together with the artist's works at an exhibition in May in Splays. And you also have the chance to see that exhibition here during the festival at the Create Your World area. So if you haven't seen it already, please take a chance and go and visit. It's a really beautiful exhibition. And you can also try out the live ink technology yourself at the Future Lab area in the Ecosystems exhibition. So it's definitely an experience. And the second project I would like to introduce you to is Project X. That is also a collaborative project together with the School for Nursing and Social Care. And the idea or the aim of that project is to develop an inclusive guided tour through the museum, to make the museum more accessible, to look at the exhibits and at the museum and the educational programs through a different perspective and a different kind of lens. And it hopefully will be an ongoing partnership, and we're very excited to future projects and what the future will bring. And so thank you so much for your time, and thank you.
Thank you, Sonia. Josh, you are next.
Hi there, everyone. What a pleasure to follow two amazing presentations. And I got the chance to see the inclusive projects things in the back there. It was really, really fun. Great. So I am going to be talking today about an approach to introducing a sort of critical perspective on technology that comes out of a research lab that I run in Sydney, Australia, called Tactical Space Lab. And what we do, we've got a methodology around kind of hacking, reappropriating, getting stuck in, and taking consumer technologies and modifying them, or just sort of rolling our own tool sets and approaches to using technology. very much focused around the idea of subversion, but also just play, the opportunity to experiment and play. Our outcomes are not really focused on polished projects, at least for the experimental stage of things. There's a big focus on just having the room to explore interesting ways of using the technology. And as mentioned before, I have a background in computer science and cybernetics, and then I pursued further into philosophy and fine art. So I've got in a position of being able to have some technical capacity for doing interesting things. In terms of the artists that we work with, so I'm just going to introduce the main thing that we do is these experimental artist studios, collaborative experimental artist studios, and then we use that as a showcase to go into running workshops with participants across a very broad age range from 5 years old into elders. And the artists that we work with, this is some examples of some of the projects that we've done. The artists come from very broad cultural and creative backgrounds. So sculptors, sound artists, musicians, performance artists, painters, all sorts of things. Notably, they don't come from a digital tech background or a digital art background. They come more from traditional art forms. And some of the things that we've come up with have then gone on after the experimental studios to become major works for places like the Australian Centre for Moving Images in Melbourne. So taking those and moving them into a context for engaging young people with a critical perspective on technology, what we do is we work through these workshops and come up with these interesting ways of using the technology, and then those become showcases that we can then use in the context of a workshop to introduce the artist, introduce their practice, talk about the way that we've modified or extended their practice using the digital technology, and then go on to do hands-on workshops. So I'll just talk a little bit about some of the projects, I think. We've got some examples here. This is just some examples of working with different people across the board. This is a project with an artist called Jason Fu. Actually, I'll go back and talk about one of these ones. The kind of magenta project was a project with an artist, Talianet, that was about plant perception, where we were using virtual reality but deprivileging the focused vision element of it and exploring light fields and also a very rich soundscapes, the second-order ambisonic soundscape, and multi-sensory elements. So we had these IoT, Internet of Things centimeters and bits and pieces with that. Some of the other projects are, they're all quite big projects. I just wanted to point out that one in particular. This is a project with an artist, Jason Fu, who he's got a few different elements to his practice, but he looks at masks and like a presentation of identity and protests and all sorts of bits and pieces. And this project was one that came out of the COVID lockdown, kind of riffing on the idea that during that period nature was returning to the streets. So this is like the monsters and ancestors returning to the streets of Sydney, a very particular part of the streets of Sydney. And this was a generative work where over time, it ran 24/7 during the COVID lockdown. It was streamed live on YouTube as a immersive 360 work, and it responded to the weather in that part of Sydney. The time of day changed, and then we could work through generating content through online workshops with kids that would then become part of the content of that work. This is a work with an artist called Joan Ross, who explores a kind of darkly humorous engagement with Australian colonial history by reappropriating a lot of the historical paintings, colonial paintings from Australia, and then remixing them into a very different narrative. So what we have the opportunity to do by taking these artworks and engaging with them digitally is to talk about the provisionality of different accounts of the world. And we can, oops, sorry about that. We're in a position to be able to take this perception that the artists have in engaging either intellectually or intuitively with the concepts of art history and theory, basically the politics and thinking around representational technologies, and we can plug them directly into the idea of digital technologies. So have a nice unbroken chain from the sort of thinking of why you might choose to represent the world through oil painting practice, for example, and then bring that sense of framing and making sense of the world that comes with what is clearly a very sighted perception of the world, and then bring that into thinking about digital technologies as well. One thing that I'm very proud of in the process is that not only was, for example, with VR technology, the students and the workshop members got to experience, most of them, the first time experiencing VR was not a consumer bit of technology, it was an artwork, but it was also an artwork that they helped create. And around all of this, this process is the idea of demystifying and just giving people a sense of being able to get stuck in and hands-on with creating things themselves. Let's see if I have time for a quick video, if I can do it. This might be beyond the... Oh, nope. We might have to skip that, I think. Let's see how we can go. Obviously, this is an opportunity for technology to be difficult because it's not playing on that screen. But we have some time for questions. Anyway, thank you.
So, dear audience, it's up to you to give some comments, to raise some questions, or you have some non-formal input or output. Yes, we have one there, yeah.
Hi, I was interested in the institutional connection and whether you're, like for Josh, whether you're a sole operator, what are the umbrellas that come over in the, what, Nicoletta was it? Yeah, of how the thing is funded and how these things come about, because you know, I know Josh has does a workshop, but these things are normally done in art schools and so on and so forth. And when you take it out of that institution, it's a very complicated process. And so I was interested in how this self-generated body of work starts to happen for both.
Yes, we have a group of people designing the school, and these people come from different fields, also academia, also art schools. We have wondered many times whether to bring this kind of school inside the academia that would have allowed us to have some funding sometimes, but then also a lot of limitations. So we, at the end, decided to keep it outside the university, but we have a large collaboration. I mean, we always invite people that also do research at the university, or we have a lot of students actually coming from art school, for example, but we have also artists as teachers or conducting workshop. Then the school is a co-production of our cultural center in Bologna with another cultural center in Palermo, and our dream is to have different points around Mediterranean territory to explore different point of view and aspect from different areas. So yeah.
Josh, you want to answer as well?
Yeah, I mean, that's a fun question as well for me, thinking about it, because in a formal educational context, actually, there's a vested interest in kind of mystifying the technology, because you want to say that you have a value proposition for learning it in a university instead of through YouTube or whatever. So it's funny to think about. I mean, the bulk of a lot of that workshop experience is doing things, for example, in VR. And working with 5-year-old kids, it is very similar to the idea of building a shoebox diorama when you're creating a world and walking through, sort of putting those elements in there. So yeah, it's very different sort of, obviously the different contexts are trying to do different things, but it's funny to see that difference of a university kind of creating a structure around what that set of skills means beyond just sort of playing. Like, no one would say, okay, you're paying this money for art education in order to just play in the way that you could at home. Whereas with the kids, it is just play. And it has that quality to it.
Any other questions? Andrew.
Yeah, just following up on that from each of you. So this, what is sort of the benefits, the things that you can do outside of the formal educational institutions? Like, you're all working in these non-formal learning environments. That's what we've been discussing today. And I think, Josh, as you just said, there's like real emphasis on play. Just each of you, what do you find that you can do there that you wouldn't be able to do in these more formal educational systems?
I think in an informal setting, you can, as you mentioned, be more playful. You can explore more, because there's not that setting of assessment like there is in the formal educational setting. So there's no judgment as such. There's no right or wrong. You're just experimenting. You're just exploring. You're just going with a spontaneous idea and thought and exploring that. Whereas in an education, in a formal setting, there's always that assessment in mind. Like, I'm going to be marked. I'm going to be graded for this. I have to do that to achieve a specific grade at the end of the year. And in an informal setting, you don't have that. So it's much more freeing to work in that kind of setting, not just as an educator, but also as someone visiting that setting, like a kid or young people. So yeah, anyone?
I agree about this freedom, which is also about choosing the topic that is more relevant in that moment. So every year, for example, we explore different things within this framework, and sometimes we choose it like very, just few months before the school, because something really important happened. And then another thing about freedom is to use, for example, all the 24 hours. So we do workshop at night, we do things, grounding experience early in the morning. We use spaces in a very free way. We go outside in the park to do something, then we stay inside to do. I mean, that kind of freedom of choosing tools, but also settings, and also timings, etc.
Josh, you want? Yeah, okay, yeah. Yeah, I just want to add, I think the beauty of non-formal education lies as well in the absolute interdisciplinarity which is possible in such a process.
And then, sorry, if I just can add one thing, then I give you the word. It's also about the community that then we engage. Very often are very different ages and background, and maybe inside the formal education with curriculum, then it's more difficult to have that, mixity.
It's just a simple question. Is this working? Yeah. You were talking about Nicoletta. This is a question for you mainly, but I mean, obviously for everyone. But you were talking about the activities that you were doing and some of the methodologies. And you were talking about spirituality as being one part of it, as the body, another part of it. And often these are things that we explore in the arts and in education. But I wonder, what do you mean by the spiritual side of what you explore in nature and things like that?
Maybe I'm so enthusiastic because I come from economy, so not from an art education. So for me, it's like so important to have also this part. But I mean, spirituality in many forms, like meditation, just, recognizing that there's an intellectual part of us, there are feelings, but there's also a spiritual part. So we did the experiment of deep listening, for example, or meditation, guided meditation, following mushrooms or mycelium. We did walking meditation, this kind of activities. So one day is made usually of different activities that activate different parts of us. So.
Thank you, Nicoletta. More questions in the audience? Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, so at this point, I have to say the end is near, very Frank Sinatra-ish. We bring this afternoon to a close, and for wrapping up what happened here on this panel, Andrew will join. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been an excellent discussion today, focusing on the non-formal learning, and also following up from what we were discussing yesterday about educating an activist intelligence and looking at AI and education around sort of tech as well. I was kind of trying to think a lot about what we've discussed today, like the important ideas of like building relationships, communities, sort of like getting out of the way, giving agency, and these notions of facilitation. And I was trying to think of like what is some sort of metaphor of like how we as educators in non-formal or learning environments, how we can kind of sum this up, one sort of like visual idea. And I was thinking of like an interface where there's like the in-out, or a network hub. We're kind of like in the middle and facilitating everything. But then also thinking very much again about like what we were discussing yesterday around AI intelligence, but all these like metaphors, there's still that black box in the middle of like, we might be there to kind of bring in sort of young people and like support and help and facilitate, but that black box, there's still the structures, there's still the systems, there's still sort of this algorithm, this recipe of how to do things, and it's a bit hidden. And I was thinking, so what is the metaphor of how like non-formal learning environments, how we as educators should be, like where we're like listening, we're responding, where things go in and out, and we kind of can make changes. Like, what is this object, where it's not a black box? And as I think of like what's going in here in my ears, and this is the mind. And we're kind of just talking about it then towards the end of this embodied being, this talking about sort of mindfulness as well when we're talking about STEAM education, and that like this role that we have as educators is right here. This is us as humans. And I think that's very important when we talk about like listening, empathy, understanding, that as a society, like we're just talking to each other, and this black box, this sort of like school system or this like education, that's not what we're looking for. What we're looking for is just people that are here to sort of listen, to kind of guide, to not judge, and to sort of like feel what the others are feeling, feel where they are right now, and feel like what's happening in the world. And I think that's a really important thing to kind of like think about when we discuss what is education, what is non-formal learning, what is the systems that we want. And I think we always need to bring it back to, not to be too anthropocentric, but always to bring it back, but we are embodied beings as well, living in a world with each other. And so I just kind of want to end on that. And also sort of like, one last sort of like pitch to our Critical Change Lab project, which this conference is done in the framework of. Just a few sort of ideas, and then the last one slide where please like sign up to hear more about what we're doing. We have a lot of resources coming out soon, so sign up to the newsletter so you can get them. And thank you everyone, and I hope we can sort of work together with young people, with the institutions across the world that we've heard from today to kind of make critical change. And also, thank you so much, Nicole, for hosting today.
Yes, thank you, Andre. Listening and hearing about all these beautiful projects makes me really acknowledging that panic is a very paradoxical situation. On the one hand, it strips away so much security, but in the other hand, we are in the situation to ask so much questions about that. And so my non-formal learning from this evening is panic, yes, no, and I would say yes, a little bit, maybe. And thank you for being here. Thank you for your attention, for asking questions, for your interest in this topic. Stay non-formal, informal, informal, whatever. Thank you. Bye.